Hello and welcome to the Berkcast, the How to Train Dragon podcast. I'm your host HC. With me are.
Rush 2112.
And Wolf.
And oh my god, it's here, guys. Oh my god. Season 6 of Ace to the Edge, the final season of Dreamworks Dragons. It's been 8 years, I think, around 8 seasons, around 6 years, give or take. And it's over. This is the final season. The final episode is upon us. What do you say, guys? Shall we get this party started?
Party is a strong word for this event because I'm
Let's get
secretly
this
crying.
discussion. You're secretly crying, okay. Anyway, so if you're new to the Bellcast, then first of all, welcome. Good to have you here. Second, here's how our reviews work. We are starting off with a quick non-spoiler discussion, our general thoughts about the season, and then we'll give you a heads up once we start going into spoilers territory and go over the season episode by episode. So, if I may quickly start, I think it was a great season, and I won't say it's the best one. I think that still belongs to season 4, and I think I'll say rest of the year season 2 was probably a bit better than this, but I think it's my third favorite season as of right now. Maybe if I'll sit on it a little more, it will change. But uh, point is, I really like this season. It has a few problems, but I really enjoyed it. I think it was a strong finish.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it definitely had a very good ending. In terms of just plot and even the fillers, like they're still all somewhat stronger ideas, give or take for one or two, because that's just how it usually goes for the stronger seasons. Um, the things that happen are believable. Um, if you don't look at this from certain perspectives, as like, which I'll go into later,
Mm.
non-spoilers perspectives. Um, but a lot of these things that happen are things that just kind of go with what they've set up, and so it's not from left field. Um, finally, for once, and it just makes sense in the end. And I'm not gonna say like the end because we'll get to that later.
Yeah, we'll get to that later. So, Wolf, what did you think?
Um, I thought this was a fun season. There was a lot of stuff here that was enjoyable. It seems like the show just had a lot of fun with a lot of different things. In my opinion, watching it, it seems like they just said, hey, let's just have a lot of fun. Let's enjoy ourselves. This is our last season. Let's just do what we want to do. And I think it shows because I definitely had a lot of fun. I was smiled a lot, laughed quite a few times about some of the different stuff they did throughout for a lot of the episodes. And yeah, it was a fun, enjoyable season. I think that's as simple as you can put it.
Okay. So,
It wasn't like, like you and Roche both said, it wasn't perfect. It has its faults, just like everything else, but still overall fun and enjoyable.
mhm. So overall, we all liked it, but at the same time, we acknowledge that faults exist, and we'll get to them and the positives in a second. Anything else non-spoiler you want to say before we start delving into it?
Let me put it this way. So, just a quick disclaimer. I yesterday when watching this after my test, a friend and I on a Discord server decided to watch this while doing a drinking challenge, and so the first watch through, I got to about episode 8 or 9 ish. I mean, obviously when we get to there, I'll remember which one it was. Before I kind of started to lose focus, and this is actually around like five five whole drinks because the challenge was pretty bad.
What was the
The
challenge?
it was Wolfie's
What?
challenge, Wolfie Dragon's challenge, and it was basically here. Let me pull up the rules for those who want to participate or want to go back and participate. And the thing is, let's just put it this way: Wolfie Dragon didn't even watch season 6. He hasn't watched a bunch of seasons, but he still was able to. He was still able to get a pretty good, rule set for things. And I'll probably just have to keep scrolling up. But yeah, so I think some of them include take a sip every time Heather leaves to find herself. Take a sip every time Astrid falls off her dragon, something like that.
Oh,
It was stuff like that. But basically, in the end, there were a bunch of other things that were really. There were also some, let's say, rated R stuff. It's like every time something blatant is happening, and
every time Hiccup calls Toothless Bud.
oh yeah, there was here we go. So, Sip if Heather angst about her past. Hiccup tinkers with the dragon eye. That one really killed us. Tough Nut is quirky. That one also killed us.
Why would you even? Good lord.
Oh, that's what
Continue
Wolfie
on.
said. Okay.
Continue on.
Pokemon commands Toothless Plasma Blast. Although he didn't do that as much, and you can get into that. It actually happens in the very first episode, so that'll be in recent memory. We finish the drink if Fish Legs finds his courage again. Stuntlet finds his kindness again. Astrid falls off Stormfly again, and Heather leaves to find herself again. And then that rated R thing at the very end. Not safe for broadcast.
Have all the things that apparently come back, but you kind of gave up on Rough Nut and Tough Nut doing something stupid because you know you would die if you would
we also put
take a
Tough
shot
Nut
every
as
time.
quirky, so there's really that right there.
I mean, I'm surprised you're not dead with that.
Yeah, well, hey, that's why I said it was episode 9. Well, for one, I'm 6'2" and almost 190, so I have a little bit of absorbance in me, if you know what I mean. But
Still.
yeah, but let's just put it this way. So I was still
Good thing you weren't
fine.
drinking hard
No,
alcohol.
I was not. So we got to episode 10, which was that one's still fine. Episode 11 a little bit. Episode 12 I had a hard time remembering, and then episode 13, the very end part of that, I was like, what the hell is going on? I could not figure out what was I'm like, is this even real? Are they serious with this? And oh man. But so because of that, I went back at the very end, because this bad example rush here. We did this at 9 a.m. because that's when I got done with the test at 20 minutes after it started. So we start. Well, hey,
Nice.
at least I don't wake up today feeling really bad. I was able to consistently monitor my water intake at the very end of the day and get myself to feel better for this. But yeah, so I rewatched those about episodes. I think episodes 10 through 13. Just because I needed to rewatch them, because I knew I would not remember anything.
Yeah,
Mhm.
you know something. 2 things before we go into spoilers. When I woke up this morning, I opened my phone. The first thing I see is Rush writing to me on Discord, all caps lock. I am so mad, or something.
Oh
like
yeah, that was. Let's just put it this way. Yeah, that was also kind of the original point. Drunk Me has a very different perspective on those last couple episodes than Sober Me does. Oh man.
Understandable.
Yeah, when I rewatch it, man, it's like, jeez.
We should also
Okay.
say that the Berkcast does not endorse this drinking game. So if
Do
you do
not.
partake in
Yeah,
this drinking game,
Absolutely
do not send us
not.
angry comments if anything happens to you. Please do send all of your angry comments to @WolfieDragon, the creator of said drinking game.
Yeah,
Uh,
we'll link
one,
him in the description.
One last thing I'll say about
You
this
can just
is,
post the rules to the drinking game in the description.
yeah, I'll do that. Beware.
Oh my god. Anyway, the one thing I do want to point out that it's not a spoiler that in the show opening, notice that every 2 seasons they change the dragons that they see through
You're
the
going to point out
dragon
the thing
eye.
I think you're going to point out, because I was going to point this out as well.
Ooh.
And and this time they didn't follow with the dragons from season 5, but one of the things I see in the Dragon Eye is chicken.
Yep.
Uh-huh.
I was going to
And
point that out as well.
that's amazing, and I love it.
That I think that was probably the biggest precursor, or that Wolf had just said how they had a lot of fun with this season. Like, why would you put chicken in the Dragon Eye?
Because I didn't have enough new dragons, so they said, you know what, whatever, let's put chicken there.
They've had 25 new dragons throughout all of Race to the Edge.
Oh,
If Spitelout's number is correct.
Well, yeah,
I'm not actually bothered to count.
This is specifically, we need to fill the quote. But anyway, I think that's pretty much all.
That's actually a good question. There's only one new dragon this whole season.
Yep. Unless you count Titan Wings being a little bit different than technically two. But
guys, this is kind of spoilers.
Oh, wait, sorry, 2 dragons because blah, blah, blah. I mean,
Let's wait with this, please.
Not the Titan Wing 2. I'm talking about that ending. Because that's technically a new dragon according to... if How to Train Your Dragon 2 doesn't happen.
Anyway, if you haven't watched the season, so this is your chance to close the video. Go watch it. Come back later, please, because we need the views. I probably used that joke in the last season, but whatever. So anyway, spoilers from 3, 2, 1.
Now.
You're still here? Good. Let's talk spoilers, because that means you either watch the season or you don't care. Anyway, so our first episode is In Plain Sight. Who wants to start?
Johan really likes daggers.
Assassin's Creed Johan.
That's one of the notes I have down here, just because how many daggers he threw at Hiccup down inside the Sandbusters area.
You know what? If we can start at the beginning of the episode, I just love how when Krogan and Vigo start going at each other, he just throws the daggers right at them. Like, shit. We just found out that he's a bad guy, but
yeah,
damn.
It's like, man, he just goes all out pretty quick. Goes from 0 to 100 pretty quick.
Yeah, they definitely... Looking at as an opening for a villain, I think this was set up really well for Johan.
Yeah, because, people did bring up like that it's sort of a problem that we knew him as this silly comic relief, and then you turn him into a villain. How are we going to do that? But I think that was like the perfect setup for the new Johan. Like, again, 2 of his allies, in massive quotes here, start arguing, and he just throws daggers at them. It's like, shit. I mean, this is business.
I mean, whatever
his voice changes, his voice, like the inflections in his tone, like he's been waiting his entire life to play this part. You can tell.
I mean, whatever your thoughts about the show might be, I've always maintained that they've done villains fairly decently well, to sometimes really well, in my opinion, throughout the show. Like, they've always opened up with villains and had villains who, like, during their time of being a villain, they're actually really good at doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Johan continues that trend of having, really good villains.
Mm-hmm. One last thing I'll say about the opening scene of the episode is that I kind of like the concept of the way for the Dragon Eye to show you the King of the Dragons is if you have the 5 lenses of each different class, because, it is the King of the Dragons. So it's nice that they bring up the fact that there are different classes and all of them bow down to him. So, a lot of similar shows use that kind of
as we call it.
But yeah, I like that.
And so begins the MacGuffin quest.
Yeah.
To find the 5 MacGuffins.
Tune in next week when our plucky writers try to find the next lens.
Well, if you're trying to do
same dragon time, same dragon.
But, yeah, it's definitely a MacGuffin quest, but, many shows have done this. There's nothing wrong with it.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't necessarily focus on the MacGuffin quest, which we'll get to that in a bit. I didn't think was the greatest of ideas, but it's there, but it's definitely like it feels like there's a lull where they just kind of Dragon Eye lenses are accrued, but there's nothing really happening during that time. But we'll get to that in a bit.
Yeah.
But of course, the Dragon Eye 2.0 looks like a Night Fury. Of course it does.
It looked like that last season.
No, it didn't. Did it?
Yes,
Did I miss that?
No,
Because I swear it didn't.
Night Fury design was this season.
Yeah,
I could have sworn. I could have sworn it was black last season when he finished it. So I almost guarantee that it was going to be a Night Fury.
It would have been nice if it wasn't, though. Just something different. Be creative, Hiccup.
Anyway,
come on.
Yeah,
well,
I know.
He came up. It's the same guy which created another Dragon Eye and called it the Dragon Eye 2. I mean,
also, thank you, Rough and Tough, for calling him out on that name. Like,
yeah,
even the show recognizes.
That was another sip. Anytime he has something X2, that was a self-imposed rule there.
Mm-hmm. There was actually quite a few instances throughout this season of Rough or Tough breaking the fourth wall a little bit.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there's one in particular.
Mm-hmm. I think it's the one. I think I know the one that you're talking about.
But we'll get there.
We'll get there. Anyway,
also,
as soon as they say the northern markets, I'm like, really? You really want to go there? Nothing good happens there. Like,
okay.
never.
Also, yeah. So before we move on and before I forget, I just want to say that some people might think, oh, if Johan has been waiting this long, why can't he wait any longer? But that's the thing. He said he's tired of waiting. He just got the final lens to show the King of Dragons, but now he needs 5 more. So, of course, his plans are actually going to get a little bit worse because it caught him off guard. He thought this was it. He never had to deal with them again, but he does. So he kind of has to go back to that idea, which I think actually does explain why he kind of just gives up the act then and there.
We should say also, when they revealed Johan, we were wrong about when they might reveal them. We said a few episodes in, it was literally episode 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
and
we all kind of guessed that it would be 2, maybe 3 episodes in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You know what? I am grateful for this for 2 reasons. One, because the audience knows that Johan is a villain from the end of the last season. So it's so I'm glad they just cut straight to the chase. And
absolutely, I was going to say the same thing.
Especially because Johan acted way too suspicious throughout the time he was supposed to be he acted as a quote-unquote friend. Mm-hmm. Like, one of the notes I took here is that Johan seems way too suspicious. And then,
Dagger.
when...
Oh, go ahead.
And then, but then when he reveals himself, I like the reveal. I like how he reveals himself at the cave when it's only him and Hiccup. I liked how he slowly but surely told him this. I liked how Hiccup told him that, you know what, I actually kind of figured it out. Like, looking back at several things, I realized this. Kind of like they kind of sold me on the fact that maybe they did plan this at one point, and not just because they got renewed. But then we get like the motivation that he's doing this for the money. It's like, really, this villain again? Enough with that. I'm doing this for the money. But
Johan's not entirely doing it for money. Like, he wants the King of Dragons for himself. Like, he does kind of explain that in this episode. Like, he's not working for Drago.
No, I'm not saying that he does, but he does say, if I'll have the King of Dragons, imagine how much money I can get from it.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, it's also, you're also kind of tired of hearing, I want, like, almost every other villain. It's like, oh, I'm gonna do this just to be the most powerful villain of all time, i.e. Drago. But that's the thing, like, Vigo was never really I mean, it's weird if you look at Vigo. He doesn't really want the King of Dragons for power. I don't even think he wants to sell it. I think he just wants to get back at Hiccup, to be 100% honest. Because if we look at all of his stories and stuff, and all of his scenes, we go way back, he's purely a businessman. And I don't know why people had issues with that. They're like, oh, he's such a great villain. Why does he have to act like this? He literally says he's a businessman. It's all a matter of business to him. It makes sense, people.
Yeah, I agree with you on this. But So yeah, but I'll say that the fight between Hiccup and Johan at the cave was great.
Yes, it
I
was.
really liked it. And overall, it was a strong first episode.
Still
Like
love that.
it got me. Yeah, go ahead. What do you want to say?
Still love that look Johan gives Hiccup when he's turning around with the evil face.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
Oh, we
That's
also we
Luke.
also added a rule that we'd have to take a sip if Johan twirled his mustache, which he didn't, surprisingly. That I
Yeah,
just never noticed it.
that would have been so great. No mustache
You know,
twirling. Show
we're on
failed.
the subject of that smile.
0 out of 10.
I saw a lot of gifs. I saw a lot of gifs of this season on Tumblr already. How come nobody made this into a gif? Come on, somebody listen to this. Turn this into a gif. Come on.
Also, want to bring up 3 gold pieces for a ruby? What world do we live in? 3 gold pieces for a
Mm,
ruby.
Non-canon, proven.
That seems
I
a little
don't know.
ridiculous to me,
Well,
maybe. Maybe I'm wrong in that, but it seems a little ridiculous that you're giving 3 gold pieces for a ruby.
yeah,
Either
you
Johan's
know,
really good at
if
haggling or that
we,
person really terrible at valuing things.
Did you see how much crap that
yeah.
lady had behind her, though? She can afford
Hmm
a dinky little ruby, not rupee. This isn't Legend of Zelda.
Anyway, what did I want to say? You know, the little fight scene when they're still in the northern market, where the hunters slash flyers, whatever you want to call them, ambush them. That little fight was great. I love this.
Oh yeah, that's what I was getting on earlier. How there wasn't any Pokemon commands because Hiccup had subtle hand gestures that he had taught Toothless.
Which was a
Yeah,
nice
that's
callback to stuff that they've done way in the
Yeah,
past.
they finally had it.
yeah. So overall, like great first episode. Do you guys have anything else to
We should
add?
talk a little bit about the side story in this one, which was Dagger, Fish Legs,
Oh,
and
yeah.
Snotlout trying to get, the Dragon Eye lens from,
The bully,
Anson?
Anson.
Ansem?
Hmm.
Anson the Abominable. I love the
I
name.
thought for a
I love the
second, I
nickname.
thought for a second you said Ensam, and I'm like, what is
I
Kingdom
did say
Hearts? And
Ansem. I did say Ansem because I couldn't remember his name.
He's perfect.
But I
uh,
loved Dagger the Dente. I
yeah,
love
I
that.
did
That was
like
just
it.
so much
Even
fun.
you know, it is an interesting angle to put on Dagger that he was bullied at one point, and because it does play into the fact that he said that his parents died so that he could take over, and because his backup story for this was that he killed his own father in order to, prove that he is worthy to be chief. So I like that angle. Maybe that let him realize that maybe if I'll let them believe I killed my father, they'll see that I'm ready to be chief. And because, yeah, so I like that angle to him, and yeah, that part of the episode was fun as well.
The real question is, why didn't he kill Anson when he was deranged? Maybe Anson kind of laid low for a while. Guess we'll never know.
I
Or
mean,
maybe just
I
realize
mean,
that he doesn't care enough. Who
I mean,
knows?
looking at the way, again, like, that was a bully for Dagger. I mean, even if Anson is kind of pathetic in his own right, that's kind of the point. Like, Dagger saw him as something way, way worse and way, way more in his head. So it kind of makes sense that he wouldn't have killed him because it was just a hard thing for him to be able to do. Sure, it doesn't make a lot of sense, maybe, but I can kind of see it
Fair enough.
from some points and some angles. So, but again, it was
You
a
know,
fun little side story. It was a fun little side story. And
one
it came
fun,
together really
one
well
last
and
fun.
kind of showed how much Dagger has grown too when by the end of that little
Yeah.
side story, which was fun.
One funny thing for me is that Anson keeps saying that he wants. How did he call the creature that he apparently tries to find?
The
Thunderfish.
Which
Thunderfish.
ended up being a Scoldren.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought it was going to be a new dragon when he said it, and like when I saw the shape underwater, and I'm like, man, this looks exactly like the Scoldren, and then. Doug actually says that's not it's a Scoldren, and I'm like, oh, okay, it was supposed to be a Scoldren.
I liked his response. There aren't dragons in the sea.
Yeah. That was great too. It's like dragons don't swim. Like, where have you been? You
Yeah.
live on an island. But I'm surprised. I was a
Yeah,
little
that's
surprised that it was a
correct.
Squadron and not a sea shocker, though,
Yeah, like
considering
why would he say
thunderfish,
thunderfish?
electricity.
Yeah.
It's like you have such a great idea there. It's like, why not make it a sea shocker? I feel
Oh,
So
like
I
they
guess
missed a
sea
bit right
shocker's
there.
not as easy to fight off as a, or not as a great feat as fighting off a squadron.
I guess.
mhm.
Yeah,
Either
Yeah.
way, this was a very
Anything else?
fun first episode to start
very
off
good.
on, I think.
Yeah, very good opener.
Yep. Okay, so moving on to episode 2, No Bark, All Bite. Uh, I'll I'll just say one sentence. Great concept, half-baked execution.
I predicted that. I predicted the plot of this episode the second that they left.
Oh yeah, I mean it's a very easy episode to follow. I love the fact that Stoic is very heartbroken.
Oh yeah, and then
Yeah,
so
yeah.
also during this episode
Being at the beginning was great. I'll say that.
we said
Poor Stoic.
so we I said looks like we're getting a return to Stoic the Vindictive.
He was hurt. Johan hurt him bad.
Yeah, so okay.
Yeah.
So just a quick thing. So a lot of people for some reason, if I remember correctly, said season 4 was like the fan fiction season for weird reasons. But this one for me seems like it had actual stories that I've seen in fan fiction. This one, not the episode itself, but the whole fight between Stoic and Hiccup in this episode seemed very like exactly like that. Like I have seen that before
You know,
in a fan fiction. So
if I can add something to that, like, okay, weird comparison. I'm aware, but hear me out.
right.
Have you guys seen a Goofy movie?
Yes.
Yes.
So it's kind of the same thing, like as a father and a son going for all intents and purposes on a trip together, and the son wants one thing and the father wants another thing, and eventually they start fighting. But here's the thing: something about the thing that made a Goofy movie work is that you could get both sides. You can get Goofy side, and you can get Max's side. Here, I didn't get Stoic's side at all. I mean, I know he was hurt, he felt betrayed, and everything, but Hiccup for one. Hiccup is on the same boat, and second, you can't really blame Hiccup for falling into Johan's plans if you are guilty of the same thing. And when Hiccup does call him out on that, so Stoic tells him, if you want to apologize, it's way too late. What does he need to apologize for? You both fell for his deception, but you need to work together to fix it. Just because you're full of pride doesn't mean you have to be an asshole to your son, Stoic. So that annoyed me.
That's
Stoic was a bit annoying to me in this.
that's why I can agree. This episode, the idea, the premise is really good, but it is maybe not completely thought out.
They didn't
Like
really
seeing
make Stoic chiefly. Just seemed
that
like
and
too vengeful.
yeah, like it's very much Stoic is acting off of anger and spite, but he's targeting it towards the wrong people, and it's kind of a shame
Exactly.
because seeing Hiccup and Stoic
And,
fight is a really good character moment for these two because you expect them to have fought before, and seeing them fight in the show is a really good idea. The problem is this fight doesn't feel good for either of their characters. It just seems like for Stoic especially, it's kind of why now? Like I don't feel like you're acting how I would expect you to act entirely. This feels a little bit off for you, considering what you're arguing and kind of what you're upset and angry about and who you're directing it at. So this, the fight between them, while I want to see stuff like that from time to time, I think it's interesting for the characters, and I think it's something that could and did and should happen from time to time. It doesn't come across well here, unfortunately.
And I want to add something to that. Stoic and the Hiccup does hand up that talk, which I like Skullcrusher and Toothless trying to bring them to talk to each other.
Yeah, that was a
That
nice
was
little moment.
fun.
The dragons are smarter than they
But
look.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but then there's the entire thing that the traders that Stoic suspected ended up being the real bad guys of the episode.
It was actually
and
Hiccup.
that
Hiccup
bothered
had
me
called
because
for them.
yeah, but the fact that Stoic suspected them and he ended up being right, that ruined that also bugged me because that means that Stoic's behavior, which I wasn't a fan of,
Was a little
in this specific
justified.
episode.
It kind of, yeah, I would agree. It justifies his behavior somewhat. It's like it would have been a little bit better if they didn't do that, and that way his behavior wasn't as justified. That would have probably, I think, helped somewhat because it would have gave across this idea that Stoic isn't perfect, that even as chief he can make mistakes and screw up. And Hiccup calling him out kind of shows that Hiccup can, is better than Stoic in some areas as well. It would have really helped with the fight a bit more, but they didn't do that. Again, like it's a good idea, and I agree. Like this episode didn't execute it perfectly well, but they did have a good idea and premise here.
Yeah.
I
will say though,
split real quick though. We say yes, the whole. I think it's only happens when you break it down to the characters because we get the two parts of the episode. We get the son and dad off in the wherever, but I think everything that happens on Berk is actually done really well.
Yeah,
and that's
agree.
That's most of the episode.
And I'll say that the entire fight scene at the end was
very
awesome.
good.
Yeah. That was great.
Go Astrid for a little bit during the attack on Berk. Like she really kicked butt there for a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It would have been so, and I loved her throwing the axe at Krogan again and him just catching it.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit of a callback there. I did. We should.
There's another good moment for Krogan. Once Stoic and Skullcrusher are flying, in front of the door to the Great Hall, which has been blocked. And Stoic has the plan that I'll get under Krogan's skin, and then he'll he'll make a disinitial fire at me, and then I'll dodge, and he will free the door. And Krogan actually figures this out. So I like that. He's not just I have a dragon. He knows how to use it. I like that.
Absolutely. Also, talking about Astrid kicking butt for a bit. Geez, Stoic absolutely just runs Skullcrusher directly into that dragon and headbutts that guy and just throws him. That was so great. Awesome. It's like, yeah. This scene that was just great. It's like, yeah, go Stoic. All right.
Exactly.
We should, talking about, Vigo's.
Almost making me forget that you were acting like an asshole before. Almost.
Talking about Vigo's outlandish plans in the past, we should point out Johan's kind of outlandish plan here that he delivers all these supplies to Berk, and and his plan here is that Stoic will go out of his way to take all of their supplies, including willow bark, destroy it all. He figures Hiccup will commission for 3 different traders, so he sends out 3 different traders for Hiccup to commission, and plans for, and again, his plan entirely relies on Stoic just destroying all of the supplies they had bought from him, including the willow bark. So he sends those traders without willow bark, and then knows all of the islands where they can find willow bark and has the flyers go out and destroy those islands where willow bark is to get them away from Berk. Like his plan entirely relies on Stoic destroying their supply of willow bark.
And the pointing fact that they don't realize that immediately after the first island is destroyed by the flyers. It's like, hey, they destroyed the willow bark.
Well, Hiccup did, but Stoic was too angry, quote unquote angry, to realize it.
Yeah.
But again, like his entire plan relies on them destroying the willow bark. What if Stoic decided, no, we're not going to destroy the willow bark? Just saying, a bit of an outlandish plan here from Johan, but it's fun. Also, I love the back and forth between when they were actually caught and Gabber sitting there. Haha, they didn't think about my old hook hand. Immediately comes and takes hook hand. It's like, Gabber, probably shouldn't talk about your plans out loud. And they still go ahead and talk about their next plan out loud anyways, but they didn't hear it that time.
Yeah.
And I love, Snotlout's little, oh, I would clap for you, Gobber, but I can't. My hands are tied. I mean, your hands aren't tied so much that you still can't clap a little bit. It's not loud.
Yeah.
Let's not
Just
have
saying,
this
it's not
moment,
loud.
all right?
Well,
A lot of moments stolen from Snotlout this season, considering how many people tell him to shut up.
Oh man.
oh
There
yeah,
was some great
But
parts.
we'll get to
I have
my favorite moment of his later.
Yes.
And to end it off for
we'll get
me,
to
like a nice ending moment for Stoic and Hiccup when they make up at the very end.
Yeah, and this is the thing that I noticed is kind of because this is the first time we actually hear Stuart talk to Hiccup about being chief at one point, and I think this entire season kind of had a theme of growing up into a role or responsibility. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can see it. Yeah.
We'll see a bit of it in the next episode as well.
All right, and speaking of, anything else, or should we move on?
I pretty much got everything I think out of the way. So
Yeah.
No, I mean,
what about you
this
guys?
was a good second episode. Again, it had a really interesting premise. It didn't execute it perfectly, maybe, but it was still a fun and enjoyable episode.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I said, it has a great idea and a great fight scene, but the execution was a bit lacking. But it doesn't kill the episode.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, episode 3, Chain of Command.
Chain of Command.
Now,
Okay.
this is an episode that I'm sure a lot of people aren't going to be happy about, considering, first off, the Wing Maidens are back, and they definitely are a group that has been a bit contentious.
To be honest,
Your mic is cutting out a lot, HC. Can you repeat that?
Yeah.
I said that I don't mind the Wing Maiden.
I don't either.
They're fine.
Yeah. I think everybody was just getting over the
But I do.
absurdity of it.
The first note I took here was, I don't know why, but what's the name? Is Atali the leader of the Wing Maiden?
Atali is
Yeah.
the leader.
Atali.
Yeah. So when she orders and what's her name? I wrote it here. Minden. When she orders Minden to stick to the island while she and another one of the Wing Maiden will go assist Hiccup. There's the entire thing that Maiden said, I want to come with you. And for some reason, I thought someone was going to be a traitor in that scene.
I wrote
don't
the
know
same
why.
thing. I was like, I wonder if they're going to have a traitor on Wing Maiden Island. I wrote the exact same thing. Like, it feels like they might be playing Minden out to be kind of to betray them later or something. She didn't, and I like the way they went with this episode instead. But I did write down the exact same thing as well. Is there a traitor on Wing Maiden Island? Possible traitor on Wing Maiden Island. I wrote down the exact same thing.
You guys have trust issues. Jeez.
Yeah. Well, when Johan is the main villain of the season, he can
They hurt
really
us,
blame us.
Rush. They hurt us.
Well, why don't you just burn all the willow bark then, huh? If you're that
I don't
hurt.
have any.
Well, there you go.
I would if I could.
Next time you go to the store and they don't have any, suspect that store.
I will. Also,
Well,
the
like
first
that.
comment the first note I wrote, well, the second note I wrote down, because the first one I wrote was Wing Maidens are back, and like I said, again, considering the past, people are definitely going to be, people are definitely very meh or kind of all right on the Wing Maidens. They're very much kind of contentious, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that they kind of set them up to be, cannibals, but they're not actually cannibals. People have a lot of issues with the Wing Maidens. I understand why, but I'm fine with them.
As the one of this trio that didn't specifically like the previous season, I didn't really mind them even back then. I think it was just the first clip they released was them, and nobody caught on to the fact that there are baby razor whips on their back. Everyone just had their
oh my god! I think the people, like when that trailer came out. First off, I remember this because I woke up at like 8 in the morning because my phone was like on fire, which is amount of posts and everything going on, and people were like, oh my god, fairies, they're flying. It's like, I could see the fact that there was a razor whip tail and head behind him in like my foggy morning state, And these people are freaking out because they can't even see something so simple that it just. I mean, granted, the razor rip isn't really a good idea either, but it's like, why are you freaking out? Just take a second and look, please.
A lot of people have issues with them flying around with baby razor whips, thinking that the wingspan shouldn't be able to carry them. Everything again,
but
like
the first
a
thing
lot
that
of
they thought
contention
was that they were fairies. It's like, geez, it's like focus on the real issues. They're razor whips carrying them. That's the real issue, not the fairies, man.
I would say that this season made me understand and appreciate the concept of why they're using the baby razor rips, but we'll get to it when we'll get to the episode.
I mean, yeah, we'll talk about that in a bit.
Anyway,
so moving on, the second note I wrote down was about Snotlout's skinny blonde comment.
Oh,
wow, Snotlout. Wow, Snotlout.
Yeah, that's why.
Wow.
You know, that was really something. And I will say
this, great.
The note I took was we're doing this plot again in this show. We're doing again the plot of they don't trust me enough. I need to show them what I can do, and then it ends up that Minden screws everything up even more. It's like, God damn it, again?
But we get Snotlout to actually, the person who went through this, to comment on it, and actually, this is, if you think about it, this is more his episode than Minden.
Sure.
At the very beginning, they set it up for like, it's going to be Snotlout episode. Yes. And it actually is his episode. They just try and put some shroud over it with Minden, but it is his episode. He's right in the end.
This episode is...
You know, that's one thing I will say, even though Minden's act has been done before and I didn't really care for it here because, goddammit, we've seen it so many times, Snotlout was great in this episode because, you know, he was never really given the role of a mentor. I'm not counting Gustav, but so it was interesting to see him mentor someone, and he was great at it.
Yeah, this is why I said, like, I liked where they went with this episode. Like, they used Minden as the foil for Snotlout, but, you know, they made him acknowledge the fact that, hey, he screwed up in the past, and, you know, and he acknowledges that. He even says, like, hey, don't listen to me. I've screwed up in the past. I'm not that smart. But, you know.
But then he also goes on to say, hey, if I die and you come back, just make sure you do everything in your power to tell Hiccup that I tried to tell you not to do this.
Yeah.
Like, it's, you know, this is one of the reasons why I think for anyone who kind of just hand waves the entire show away, I would say you're missing out, because there's a lot of, even if it isn't, you know, completely canon, even if it does have issues with some other characters, Snotlout's one of those characters that it consistently does really well, and I love how they write him, and they have a lot of fun with him.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of development for Snotlout through the show that I think if you hand wave away as none of it's canon, you miss out on a lot of good Snotlout moments. And this is another one of those episodes that I'm going to point to and say, this is why I find the show worth it and worth watching and enjoyable, because it does some interesting things here and there with some of the characters, and Snotlout is one of those. I'll still always remember, it's not the leg, it's everything attached to it. That was such a great line from the show that we wouldn't have gotten otherwise.
Yeah. The other thing is, this will probably, I want this to be a next question next week.
Just mention two things, and you can have the rest. Two things I want to mention is that one, my note for Minden kissing Snotlout was, didn't see that coming. Did you guys?
Yeah, that was surprising. Like, Snotlout finally, you know, got his.
Yeah. So the only thing real quick is, so when before the episode comes up, there's a little, before the episode starts, there's the little subtext that plays under it, and it says, so, you know, on another island, unlike your romance blooms, which we can get to that later, but at first I just said unlike romance blooms. So before that second part, which we haven't even talked about yet, happened, I'm like, oh, it's between Snotlout and Minden. But then the second part happens, like, oh, okay, that's what it is. But then Snotlout gets kissed by Minden. I'm like, wait a second.
We'll get to it.
Yeah, exactly.
So first there's this, and second, I did after another cool fight scene. I did like the angle that Krogan actually bonded with his dragon.
Yeah, it seems like some people had an issue with that, and I guess I can understand why. It's like he mistreats it. Why would this dragon bond to him?
I think they're
Yeah,
going
but
more on the terms of like what Drago did with his Bewildered Beast. How it's no longer a fact of it's trained. It just thinks it's supposed to.
Yeah.
yeah. So
Again, this
I thought it
I
was
like that.
yeah, I thought it was an interesting concept to introduce. Yeah. Anyway, Rush, before I stopped you, what did you want to say?
I was gonna say next week, like we could have the question, who is the best written character in all of the seasons of Race to the Edge?
Oh yeah,
And
definitely.
we would all agree. Most likely
For
we'd all
next
agree it's
episode.
not out. Well, no, I'm just saying if we had that question, there's no point in having that question because we'd probably all agree it's not out anyway. Just
Well,
based on
I
this
mean, you
episode.
could definitely
Well,
have a bit of back and forth with that question, like
Yeah.
Dagger, Heather to a
That's
degree as
true.
well.
was
I would
keeping
say.
in the writers, but
Little-
if we expand
Oh
it,
well, yeah, sure.
if we expand it, then yeah. But anyway, this is I was just going on. This is one of the again, it's not that it's really well written. He contradicts himself, but that's the thing. That is so Snotlout. Like he says we shouldn't be doing this, but then he also says, "Don't listen to me. I've screwed up so many times. I'm an idiot," as Wolf said. So it's like so perfect. But the thing we're all missing is the subplot of the story about Mala and Dagger trying to
Yeah.
Dagger and Mullah's, when we first saw their back and forth was a lot of fun. Just them two going at each other. That was a lot of fun. These are two characters interacting that was really good to hear.
Having a back and forward like that, I just enjoyed them arguing. I thought that was a really good thing. And then all of a sudden, they throw that curveball, and I'm like, you know what? I ship it. Count me in.
One thing I want to say before we get onto the relationship part. So when they were fighting and Fish Lakes tried the mediation stuff and it didn't work, but then the twins said, "We are masters of mediation." Like, of course they are. Let's just give the twins another freaking perk to them because that's another sip that I had to do. But then it switches to Mala and Dagger on a tightrope about to fight, and that caught me off guard. I almost spit out my drink because I thought they were actually going to be good at mediation, but they just wanted them to fight.
I mean, they kind of were.
I know they were in the end. They did the trust walk across the lava and then the trust fall.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so they're just.
And see, I want to bring up something that I'm surprised your drinking game didn't have. Hiccup getting captured, because that happened quite a bit.
We added one, so we didn't add one for that, but we added one that for take a sip every time Krogan is alone, i.e., all of his writers are gone at the end of an episode. That happened a
dear.
lot.
Yeah.
So,
It did. Hiccup was also captured quite a few times in this season as well. So that's why I was surprised that wasn't a rule in the drinking game. Addendum rule if anyone wants to play
yeah.
and kill themselves after all the added rules. Again, Berkcast does not endorse this.
We do not.
You play this drinking game at your own peril and risk of health.
Very, very true.
So next episode,
One note that I did make about this episode, that I want to kind of curious what you guys thought. This felt a little bit like a bit of a Valentine's episode to me. Then again, this may not be the episode that you may look at as the Valentine's episode. There's one other one that you could look at as the kind of quote unquote Valentine's episode as well. But this one kind of felt a little bit like that for me.
you have a point. You have a point. Anyway,
next episode.
so a fun episode with one handicap to me. So episode 4, Loyal Order of Ingerman. I have very few notes for this one, so let me just get this out quick. Fishlegs, the entire idea of Fishlegs coming from a family of dragon hunters would have been interesting for his character, except for the fact that when he was born, he was trained to kill dragons. The entire love for them and learning them and petting and training them came out a bit later. So that's kind of an inconsistency. And there's a new dragon which I like. It's a cold dragon. And out of the kids, I love Shrug, the one that doesn't talk. I love this kid. He's awesome.
I love how you point out Shrug. In my notes, Shrug. I was going to point him out as well. Like, he was a fun little character. Yeah, like, yeah, it might be kind of a silly thing that the show did, but again, I just love the show being silly sometimes, and Shrug is one of those
Yeah,
silly things that
yeah,
made
you
me
know,
smile.
those,
So,
it's one of those silly in the right ways.
hmm
I like
I
how you
also,
guys. Well, hold on. I like how you guys are both like, "Oh, in my notes, in my notes." I'm just like, I had a drinking game while I was doing this. You can tell who's the most fun on the
Can you
Berkcast.
see who's the most professional?
Yeah.
poor Toothless with the kids, watching all the
Oh
kids
yeah.
play on him.
You know, it's
That
so
was
funny
Yeah.
because
a nice
everybody's
little
like,
fun little moment.
there's actually that's funny because I think like within the previous month, somebody had said like, "Oh, I can imagine Toothless being so good with little kids, but he hates dragon babies because of the scene in How to Train Your Dragon 2." And then we get this. It's like, nope. And like in every
He's not the
fan fiction
greatest.
you see, he's like great with little kids. I mean, he is good with the little kids. He just doesn't like them.
Yeah, that was a fun little moment that I'd like to see. Pointing out another fun little moment. The masks of the twins, like Eye of the Beholder much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, what a reference there. But that was really fun. And Chicken's little small mask as well. That was really fun. But yeah, I'm sure there would be many people who would be mad at me as someone who's read all of the books without pointing this out. Fishlegs being, his past being a hunter, potentially, could be a small little reference to the books, and Fishlegs' past being a berserker in the
Yeah.
books. So that was maybe a nice little connection that people can make, I'm sure. And, it was fun to see.
This
But
was-
again,
yeah. This was actually a filler episode with a little bit of plot, because as you'll see, we'll come back to the Dramillions later. But yeah, so first things first, the Dramillion's just your standard dragon, wyvern style, actually, if I remember correctly, and it can shoot multiple types of blasts.
which
why
is
we'll
very
come back.
interesting.
Yeah, and
It can your Dramillion can shoot a magnesium blast and a regular lava
it
blast.
also seems like it should
Yeah,
shoot a plasma
I like
blast. To be 100% honest.
Well, it wasn't
Is it-
plasma. I
is
think
it-
it was a blast of blue fire. Might be plasma. I don't quite know. But it was definitely, it shoot two blasts, and it definitely gave off a bit of a kangaroo vibe as well for how Meatlug kind of charged it, and it just kind of went on its back and kicked Meatlug over it.
Yeah.
So it definitely felt like a bit of a, they kind of modeled it a little bit after a kangaroo as well, which was neat. Again, this was a really cool dragon to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I also, the fact that the hunter catch him in order to, practice hunting is a really interesting and cool idea. That because he had all of these types of fire, you can train on it. It serves the perfect training dummy in order to, see how you approach any kind of dragon. So, as much as I don't like the hunters hunting dragons and stuff, I thought it was an interesting idea.
Right. So this was a pretty just straightforward episode. The side plot
Look,
was Fishlegs has a sibling somehow of some sort that we have never heard about.
Yeah, it was harmless,
3.
nothing special.
Well, they could all be from the same parents.
Or they could be, cousins or nieces and nephews, what have you.
Yeah.
Either way, he has quite a few siblings.
Yeah, they call him Uncle Fishlegs at the end. So I kind of saw that happening since they were all blonde.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I just my biggest take on the episode was
We have to point out, we see Fishlegs without his hat, without his helmet.
yeah, we do.
We see his actual hair.
But I think the biggest point or the funniest thing I'd have to say about the episode is what kind of HC said, but in a more extreme manner, how Fishlegs says, "I can't believe my ancestors were dragon hunters." And that's the first thing that came to mind for me. It's like, dude, 5 years ago you guys were killing dragons, so what the hell? And of course,
Yeah.
they weren't dragon hunters; they were just protecting themselves from dragons. But it's still the same idea. It's like 5 years ago you were killing dragons regardless. So what difference does it make?
I mean, they kind of do talk about that a little bit in the show a little bit later on, where the Ingerman name is about intelligence and kindness and generosity, things like that. And so I can kind of see where he's coming from on that point, like having an actual, being a part of the dragon hunters who hunted dragons and sold them for profit. very much kind of goes against the kind and generous nature of the kind of Ingerman clan in the past.
Well,
So I
when there
can
is a-
see where they're coming from and what they're trying to do, but it does feel a bit off considering all of Berk did fight and kill dragons, defense or no. So I can see it, but it definitely kind of ruins the moment a little bit. But I can see what they're trying to go for here.
Another quick thing. This is just kind of a historical idea that I really liked. How his ancestor was named Ingerman, which is legitimately how names used to work. So it was like his. I mean, they would have been like Inger's son, but his name was Inger, which is why they get the Ingerman from. I kind of like that. Like you might think, oh, it's silly that it's the same thing, but that's kind of how it actually would work.
Yeah, a nice little nod.
Cool. So, episode 5, a gruff separation. So,
This
Gruff
is
back.
5.
Gruffnut's back.
Yay.
That's literally all that's in my notes for this episode.
Yeah, it was. Oh, hey, if we count Titan Wing Dragons, we get Titan Wing Zippo back.
Yeah, we do.
I'll say this. I thought the tradition was interesting. Like, that I like the fact that, at a certain age, if you're a part of if your family like has a name to it, you kind of have to go through some sort of a test. And I like the fact that, because they are twins, none of them can't necessarily pass the test. Even though it ended up in a fraud, I thought it was an interesting thing to throw in there. And Rough and Tough were funny in the episode. I like the moment. I like the moment Toothless slaps both of them with his tail. That was funny.
Yeah.
I like
The sound effect for that was a little
the
ridiculous.
sound effect. I also like the how it's not. It's like we have our coming of age at 9 months. We have to go fight a bear. And
Oh,
yeah.
their response though is, yeah, but Thorsons don't usually live that long. So if you make it to 19, it's like, well, geez.
Exactly. That's why I would love this tradition, because also I would love to see like a short about maybe after How to Train Dragon 3 about Snotlouse at the age of 9 months having to go hunt a bear. That would be something. Especially if Ruffnut is the bride. That anyway, one thing I will say is that near the end of the episode, it kind of started lagging to me on the stream I watched it. Thank you, Dirty Fox, for doing that. It really helped to those who don't have a Netflix with the show. I'll get to those people later, but so it kind of started lagging here. So I missed the point where like the brown-haired Ruffnut came to Berk.
Red hair.
What's her name is?
I can't
Agnes.
remember. Agnes,
Agnes,
yeah,
if I'm not
maybe.
mistaken.
But overall, I just realized that Grafnat cannot trick them, and then he ended up getting a Dragon Island. So it was a thing. It was a good one. It's filler, but it was a fun filler to me.
Bit of a reference to Harry Potter with the changeling skin being able to make other people invisible as well.
Yeah.
That was my note for it was Harry Potter much.
But yeah, it's actually kind of interesting because it shows that you can have different uses for a lot of the different dragons and some of the stuff you can get from them throughout this world, which I thought was a neat little bit of world building. We should mention, even though this episode didn't feel very plot-centric, it does actually connect back to the plot much later on because Gruffnut does find a Dragonite lens.
Yeah.
And I also loved how they figured, obviously Gruffnut's trying to, mess with us. Hiccup doesn't trust Gruffnut, opens up the chest, just a bunch of rocks fall out. It was a neat little thing.
Yeah.
And then you see the chest actually has a secret compartment, and it actually does have a dragon lens. Again, this was the start of, I'm going to say the next two episodes where I felt like we're kind of taking a lull and everything. Everything else was very much connected to this kind of overall plot. And this is where I think these next, these 3 episodes with, this episode and the next 2 episodes, I could have done with a bit more of seeing Johan doing more stuff, being more evil instead of what we did get, because it didn't feel
How dare you
relevant
say that about the next episode?
It felt, I want to just point out that it felt like Johan, Vigo, Krogan, not much Krogan, but Johan and Vigo specifically kind of disappeared after the first episode.
Yeah.
But you know what? If we are going to talk about episode 6, Mi Amore Wing, guys, and by guys I mean the people listening to us at home, get your hate mails ready, okay? Load my email address. Get them hate mails.
They don't know
ready.
your email address. HC, you should tell them your email address.
Maybe I will, but anyway, get the fingers on the keyboard. Any way you can contact me. Here we go. The Hicksmith portion of this episode sucked.
I'm going to stop recording now.
Also want to point out, it's not amore, it's amor. Mi amoring. Because amor is Italian for love. Again, it's like I love me.
That's my Italian. Anyway, but
it's a play on armor ring. It's very. I like the title's clever. I like the title for this one, and I'm gonna stop interrupting you now.
Yeah. Anyway, before this though, I need to clarify my state. So, because that was a pretty bold statement, so I'm aware. So, because Rush just threatened to finish the episode right here. So, let me explain this. At this point, we pretty much established that Hiccup and Astrid are engaged. They are about to get married. Okay, you can't really show anyone more dedication of love. So why is she so hurtful when she sees Dagger and Mala being all lovey-dovey, and Hiccup is not like that with her? Like, it doesn't make sense. And then the entire thing with he didn't notice me wearing the necklace that he gave me, which, I understand that's relatable. It happens in real life. I get it. But we're in the middle of a war here. And Astrid knows this. Astrid is going to be a general, as we all established, because everyone is calling her General Huff now. She knows better than anyone that there's a time and place for this thing. Not when we're trying to find those lenses in order to stop a maniac which betrayed us from fighting the most powerful dragon alive. And
this isn't
maybe destroyed.
HC's in
so
let him finish.
That's bothered.
So first off, HC, that's a fine statement. Okay, I want to put it this way. For one, let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question. Are you a female?
No.
Okay.
Oh boy.
Well, I say this because the actual General Hoff on Tumblr and Discord, I didn't interrupt you, so you gave me the same due diligence, all right? Wolf can interrupt me because he interrupts everybody.
Sorry. Anyway, go ahead.
General Hoff, the namesake from Discord and Tumblr, she posted that this is not about just, forgetting about war. This is about attention, and I can't remember the exact, but she basically said that she's been through the exact same thing. So this is extremely relatable to, I think, girls out there who've had boyfriends that haven't paid attention to them. And you think about this because they're giving themselves so much attention that she just thinks back on the time. It's like, well, does Hiccup give me attention? This is also, in my sense, when I was watching it, I'm like, this also seems like the fan fiction where Asher doesn't think she's good enough. Now, towards the end, I realized, okay, it's not as much that as Asher doesn't get enough attention, but it's still the same idea of fan fiction sense. That was back to my original point as well, fan fiction. But there are actual girls that say this relates to them, so I can see this happening. I have no authority on this.
But you said I get that it's relatable. I didn't say it's not relatable. But what I said is that there is a time and there is a place.
Okay, Professor Oak.
I'm not acquainted with General Huff on Tumblr and Discord in real life. I don't know what she's doing in her spare time, but I'm pretty sure she doesn't fight dragon hunters who want her dead. So,
Talking about this episode, I'll disagree with HC a little bit myself as well, but for different reasons. But I'll get into it in just a second. I'll also say that I don't think this is the episode where I felt Astrid was kind of like, where I would say there's a time and a place, this isn't it. We'll get to that episode a little bit later on, where I would say Astrid made some mistakes of her own, and we'll talk about that.
I know what you're talking about.
But looking at this episode, I like the idea here, because I've seen this, as Rush said, in a few fan fictions as well, where Hiccup has been portrayed as the, not so attentive person, where he can be in a relationship and be very loving and, doting on Astrid. And I think the show tries to set that up from time to time as well, where he does care a lot about Astrid, where he is very doting and caring and really wants to be there. But this, he is someone who's also going to forget a lot of things. He's not going to pay attention. He's not a very attentive person for certain things that it's going to crop up for him. And I love how the show brought that to attention, because that's not something you see a lot, but because that's you see this a lot in fan fiction, where Hiccup's, he's not going to pay attention to some of the things Astrid says or does, because he's going to be focused on something else. He's very attentive to some things, and others he's just going to completely let slip by him. And I love the fact that the show brought attention to that within their relationship, that it's something they're going to have to work on and deal with, that Astrid's going to have to put up with that from Hiccup if she wants to be with him, and Hiccup's going to have to try and get better at noticing things that Astrid might be saying or doing when it's something that might go completely over his head at times. I love the fact that they pointed that out. I love the fact that the show brought attention to that, because it really helps with, expanding on and kind of going more into the relationship that is, between the relationship that Hiccup and Astrid have, or Hickstrid, whichever you want to refer to it as. So I enjoyed this episode. Like, you can say there's a time and a place, but I thought this was a really good episode for exploring Hiccup and Astrid's relationship in a way that we haven't really seen before.
Yeah.
So
I
liked it.
It's a good. So I'll agree with you guys that it's a good thing to explore, and it's an interesting thing to explore. But again, you know what? If this episode was pretty much maybe not one for one, but if this episode was in the previous season where the stakes weren't as high, maybe I would have accepted it more. And it's not a bad episode. It's just that portion.
I think it's fine here. I don't think there's anything wrong with it being here, and I don't think it's a time and a place, because it's love, right? Love doesn't really consider what's going on around you. Sometimes it can be blind, it can be crazy, it can be ridiculous, because you don't think about these things.
Love by he didn't notice something about me when were in the middle of a war.
Absolutely, but that's kind of relationships, though. But again, it is more than that, though. Like, it's again, she sees how much Dagger and Mala dote on one another for being together for so little of a time, and then she thinks back to how much Hiccup doesn't really dote as much on her, and how he doesn't really pay all that much attention to her, because he is focused on so many other things. So many other things grab his attention and take him away, and she wants to just have that time with him by themselves, just them two.
Okay.
And she feels like they don't get enough of that at that point, and she wants to point that out to Hiccup.
So let me ask you this: where now, let's jump a bit into after How to Train Dragon 2, when Hiccup is the chief of the village. Is she going to repeat the entire thing again if it will happen again?
I don't think it's something that they'll repeat again. I think it's something that at this point, this was a lesson for Astrid as well as Hiccup. This was a lesson for Astrid in learning that Hiccup isn't going to be the most attentive of people at times, where he is going to forget or not pay attention or just not notice things. Like, this was a lesson for her that she's going to have to accept that about him if she wants to be in a relationship with him. But Hiccup's also going to have to accept and try to not do that, because it is going to make Astrid mad at him, and understandably so. And I think this was what the show was kind of pointing out and trying to maybe it didn't do it in the best way, but I feel like this is what this show is trying to get at, where, their relationship isn't going to be perfect. It's going to have issues, right? And I think that's kind of the takeaway from this. And I think that's the important part.
Okay. So one last thing to say about the history thing. I did like the what was the clip that they released
The
a
very
day
ending.
before. Yeah, I did like that little ending. I just didn't like the lead into it, but I'm obviously saying I'm in
Also,
minority.
I want to point out you're having me defend Hickstrid here.
Yeah, like
Me.
that's. I wanted to stay silent to hear that because, whew, I couldn't believe it, man. I'm sober, pretty sure.
Ooh, the tables have turned.
But on the other shipping side, I love Dagger's quote unquote proposal to Hiccup.
Oh yes,
I
that was
feel
so funny.
I feel
Yeah,
like even though I
that's
know
that,
it's not, I feel like that's a thing that's just
yeah.
for me because I keep talking about
I Hiccup,
Dagger's
The
boot,
boot.
Hiccup
would
with
you
Jealous
be
Savage
my
on the
best
side.
man? I love the Hiccup. Would you be my best man? I don't know what to say. Say yes. That
Yeah.
that was
Oh my
great.
Those are
god. So I was actually at that point. That reminded me. I was just like, I love Dagger's voice actor because he's like so soft, but then he's like on unhinged the next moment, saying "say yes."
Mhm.
But just on the last note, this carries over into any other the next couple of Hickstrid scenes that we get in the episodes. Like if we get a parallel at the very end, not the very end, but in basically the trailer, we get that moment where Hiccup and Astrid are standing and like while there are flames all around them or something like that, or just I guess ash falling around them. Like I know this is kind of jumping ahead, but it's a small part in this episode. But Astrid's going away, and Hiccup grabs her arm and pulls her back into it because that's probably that's what I'm saying carries over. But it also parallels the very first time when Hiccup does like the handshake and she pulls him in. So it's like Hiccup is now taking the initiative. He's more attentive. This episode carries over in subtle ways.
Mhm.
Interesting. Um, one more thing I'll say that when Dagger and Mala arrive at the edge, and Dagger said that he took the test to be Mala's king, and then he turns around and you see
He has the
the
arrow
arrow
still
on
in
his.
him. Yeah, flew
Oh
all the
yeah.
way with the
That's
arrow.
so I'll say it's a decent episode. Me not liking that one part is a meeting maybe. So yeah, hate me as much as you want because of that. I understand.
No, it's completely understandable where you're coming from. I do think there's more to it than what you might think, but I do understand why you might dislike it and why others might, dislike it as well. I can understand where you're coming from, even if I disagree with you, is what I'm saying.
Yay. Anything else? So
No, I think
actually,
we.
what did I want? I had something to say. The fight scene with Krogan, which was a great fight scene, but I'm not sure if throwing the dragon lens away for Krogan to have it was the right kind of sacrifice. Like, there was maybe one or two other ways out of this. But,
I like
minor
how they
thing.
tease that, though. I like how they tease that. Dagger's getting really, really happy, and generally in shows when you see in certain shows when you see a character getting way too happy way too fast, immediate death flags go up on that character.
Yeah.
If for reference, a show
This is
that
the best day of my life. Yeah. It was also the last day of his life.
of his life. But so I loved how they teased that, where it's like,
Oh,
oh, Dagger, oh, they're gonna kill Dagger here because he's so happy, and they're just gonna outright axe him off right here. I loved how they teased that. It's like that was actually really well done on their part. I loved that they teased that really well.
Yeah.
Was it
if I
the right sacrifice? You could debate it, but it was definitely well teased, in my opinion, from the show there. Like they knew, I feel.
They knew.
just about what you say, not related to the show, but there was a commercial over here for, paying attention on the road. When you're driving, notice that you're not bumping into other cars or, God forbid, running over someone.
Hmm.
That, you see a guy having the best day of his life, and then all of a sudden he's going into the car and he smashes into another car. The screen goes to black, and then there's this deep voice narrator going, even a dreamy day can end up as a nightmare. Watch
Jesus,
out.
that commercial.
and, And
Yeah,
you know,
that's really bad.
something about the way you described that made me think of it.
I mean, we can't say anything, Rush, over here in America. Like, they're shooting some really, really bad infomercials and how dark they get sometimes
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
certain things. Like, infomercial people, really, really dark people. They go to a dark place when they think of
Like,
those
you know,
commercials.
especially in
And
Canada, I
now the
noticed it.
extreme cleaning mop or
Mm.
something. It can mop the blood off the walls.
Oh
It's like,
God.
sold.
Anyway, before we tangent into
Back on topic.
Yeah.
we don't want to. Episode 7,
Rough
rough
transition.
transition.
The word, like the
Okay,
transition
yeah.
between the episodes.
You know, I started the last couple episodes, so any one of you wants to go first?
This one was an interesting episode. They went back to not Defender's Wing, the Wing Maiden Island, and this, despite again another filler episode, but with plot relation in it. Mostly because they are moving the Dragon Eye lenses from Wing Maiden Island to somewhere else, but it just so happens to be at the time that the baby Racer Whips choose their new people, and guess what? One chooses Roughnut because why not?
We should say the reason they're moving the Dragon Eye lenses is solely because of the twins.
Transition. Well, it's
Heard
also
a rumor.
because of transition.
Oh yeah, that too. We should also say one of the first things in my note is because of Ruff's smell somehow, isn't it? I figured they might do something like that, like it only attached to Roughnut because of something she had done to herself smell wise. I was wrong, but I thought that might be where they were going to go with it for a second there.
Well,
Watching this episode, it felt to me like this might like this watching it felt like all right, this is definitely one of those filler episodes, and I felt like again the other two kind of were as well, even though the one with Gruffnut I definitely felt like a little bit filler. This one definitely felt like a little bit of filler. The one with a really good Hickstrom moment while it was still filler, I thought that episode came across really well. This episode I felt like, even though I really loved what they did with the Razor Whips and the Wing Maidens here, and I really enjoy stuff like this, I was going to go out watching it, I was thinking, all right, this is probably going to be my least favorite episode. It's not. We'll get to that episode in a bit, but this episode definitely isn't one of the stronger ones, even though I'm someone who likes the idea of the Wing Maidens, and I like the idea of the world building they're doing with the Wing Maidens. This episode definitely isn't one of the strongest episodes of this season,
Yeah.
I feel.
yeah, I thought
And I think
unfair.
some of that has to play off the fact that it's it's very much kind of joking around with a lot with rough and tough, which is fine, but I think I would have enjoyed it more if we would have just gotten to see more of the Wing Maidens and kind of how they work with the Razor Whips and a lot of stuff like that in a non-joking way.
Yeah,
again,
because
There's
I
some good
really
book
like that
there.
ceremony. I really like that tradition that each time a razor whip is old enough to be on its own, they get new ones, and I like to see that ceremony, how it works, how they train. I really like that. I really like that.
Also,
And
pointing
also,
out, Atali is very
really sweet.
accepting. Atali is very accepting of the fact that, the Razor Whip doesn't choose her. Like, I really kind of like that. As a leader, she immediately knows, all right, I can't get upset by this. I need to just accept this and
Well,
work with
figure
it
maybe
and make sure the Razor Whip isn't hurt.
maybe it happened before. We don't know.
Possible. But, different, quick thoughts. Of course, Tuff's the motherly one, and Roughnut isn't.
Yeah. I will say it's a short but pretty nice scene I liked is that when Rafnat gets to the test of flying with the Razor Whip, Hiccup actually guides her with his gliding suit. I like that. It was a sweet moment.
Yeah, she tries to get some learning experience from Hiccup, who has had a lot of learning experience falling with style.
Yeah. And also, I like that because we don't really get a lot of Hiccup and Rafnat moments. So,
Yeah, that was a lot of
you know,
fun. That was definitely very different and a lot of fun, and I enjoyed that. Also, Go Rough at the very end for kicking a lot of butt all of a sudden. That was really fun and enjoyable.
Yeah.
that was great. And the entire, fight they showed in the clip was a great fight, as we saw before. Agreed. Anything else?
Overall, a good side episode. Maybe not one of the strongest episodes of the season, but a fun and enjoyable side episode nonetheless. And I like the world building that comes from this episode with the Wing Maidens.
Mm-hmm. I'll agree. So, Rush, anything you want to add to this episode?
I mean, I just everything I said was in the beginning. I really not too much happened in this episode that really made me go, oh hey, that's pretty nice. I mean, it was just kind of, for me, it was just there. So yeah,
understandable.
but
and
now
kind of
we get to one of my favorite episodes, assuming we're moving on.
boy.
Yeah, so moving on to episode 8, Triple Cross. I'll have to agree, this may be my favorite episode if we don't count finales, but yeah, it's definitely a great one in my opinion. Wolf, what about you?
Oh, I don't really know what my favorite episode from the season is quite yet. I've still been thinking on that, but this is definitely a good episode. Also, the betrayal, I called it.
Yeah. Can I start with this? Because it's something we did see happening even from the previous season, and even in the predictions and the trailers, we kind of talked about it, that we think it may happen that Vigo will change sides. But for one, I did like the betrayal. I did like, again, setting up Johan as a villain. You need to understand that you are looking at this character differently now. So, and this was another element. I like that, if he can choose to leave someone behind, and also consider the fact how many times Hiccup and the others left them behind on one of his stories when he was trying to fool them, I can see where he got that idea that, I don't need all of them. He's there, let him die, I don't care. And so I like that. And also I like that, if Vigo had to reform, I like it that they went with the idea of Hiccup is the enemy of my enemy. So, it's a truce, but I'm not necessarily a good guy. Again, he's a businessman. He's just doing what's right for him at the moment. And I like that.
And I love how they actually bring a lot of that up. Like, Vigo says, hey, Johan betrayed me, but I understand. I would have done the same thing to him if I was in his position, because I, would have done it. He's very open about who he is. And that's like one of the great things about Vigo. He's very open about what he would and wouldn't do. Like, yeah, you call me ruthless, but it's what I do. It's who I am. You might think it's ruthless, but it's not. It's just I'm honest. You can't fault him for being honest, I suppose.
Yeah. And also, we say again and again how much we love Hiccup and Vigo
interacting with one another. Absolutely.
But not only do we get them interacting with each other and fighting with each other, we also get to see them walking together, which was...
I mean, we've technically seen that before, too, though.
But this was more of an actual working together. Granted, it was because Vigo lied.
Absolutely.
They had a very elaborated plan, which was like, I'll have to show that I captured you, and you have to play it like I betrayed you, and then it turns out that I'll betray them and help you. So, it was two great thinking alike and coming together, and it was great. I loved it.
Can we let's bring up the most important part of the episode?
Is it what I think it is?
What are... Well, I guess you can
go
verify.
ahead. Go ahead.
Vigo's Inferno. Vigo's Flame Blade.
Oh, but no, not the moment I thought you were going to bring up.
Okay.
Well, I'll get to that. I'll bring up that moment a little bit later. But yeah, absolutely.
Let me put it this way. There were 2 points in this episode to which Hiccup has in How to Train Your Dragon 2. The Flame Blade, first off, the design with the open interior is that's Vigo's blade. Then the Zippo Backcast. But the other thing is, when he gets the Skrill, he does the sword movements. Now, he says that's just for the Skrill liking metal objects, but those sword movements are very similar to what he does in How to Train Your Dragon 2. Hiccup does with actual flames.
That's why this episode is actually so good, because it points out and shows just how much, and it really, this is why even though this wasn't the ending I think I wanted for Vigo, I can still sit back and say this was such a great ending for Vigo because it shows that
Yeah, like
Hiccup learned a lot from Vigo, but Vigo also learned quite a bit from Hiccup as well.
Yes.
And
yeah,
you hear that in
definitely.
some of the things that Vigo says, like, I would never hurt such a magnificent creature. And it's one of the things
Yes.
I learned from you, Hiccup Haddock, ironically enough. Like, such a great
Mhm.
line.
Yeah, like this
Yeah.
this this really makes up for the like us thinking that he actually died in the end of the fourth season.
You know,
Like
yeah,
this
because
this is the way to send him off.
yeah,
Like, I still think
like
it would have been better. And they even, like, the idea I talked about in the prediction episode where I said, I think I would rather see them kind of just have Vigo disappear into the wind after it all. Like they'll betray him, he'll betray them back to help out Hiccup and the gang to get back at them, and then he'll just kind of disappear off into the wind. They even talked about that and brought that up, like that's what Vigo wanted to do, but they didn't go through with it. They had him die there. I think that was really great. Like again, it's not exactly what I wanted to see, but it was still a really great moment.
And then oh my god, the
um,
ending when he hands Hiccup the traitor piece. Oh, that just broke my heart.
yeah. Okay, so few things I want to say. One, if Vigo had to go out, he went out like a freaking boss, and I loved it.
In a lightning
Also, all
nuke.
the was ouch. Not yeah. One thing I did want to say that the sub filler plot with Rough and Tough, I thought was a bit distracting at first, but then they actually used that in order to help Pickup get away from
I love
from
how
Ron. So
I
I
love how
like
they
that.
played it because you can actually, if you go back through that scene, pay attention, you can see that they're no longer on the edge or near the edge, not entirely anyways. So you can actually kind of tell that they are technically to a degree following Hiccup. I kind of loved how they played that a little bit. Like that one got me. That one actually surprised me. I can give the show credit for that one. They surprised me with that one a little bit.
Yeah. One other thing I want to ask you guys: uh, did you guys figure out how early that Toothless will be fine and there's no such thing as Red Ollie Heaven, whatever the
Right at the
plan
very
is called?
beginning, because
Yeah.
Vigo outright tells him, Hiccup, you're too gullible, you're too kind, you're too nice. It's going to end up getting you or someone else killed. And they're like, okay, then you're telling him the story about the Red Oleander. You didn't poison Toothless.
Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah.
But I had no problem with it
Hiccup's
because it
gullible
was
enough to
great.
believe
Yeah,
you.
I had no
You know,
problem with it. Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it's completely understandable that Hiccup would believe that. Hiccup thinks Vigo is that ruthless because Hiccup isn't. You know.
Oh, but then at the very end, I really like the Vigo saying, you're more ruthless than you think, or you're like something like that.
Yeah, he says, you're more ruthless than you think you are, Hiccup Haddock.
I really like that because that carries on to certain things. Not even in just this show, but if we go to the Serpent's Heir, like when he freaking tosses the Zippleback canister onto whatever that guy's name is.
Yeah.
Like I like that.
Calder.
Yeah, Calder. Like I like that.
Yeah, great moment. And also, so like I said, one more thing to note, I said this is my favorite episode of the season. And I think this may be Icelandic Eel's favorite episode because
Because of the
we
tooth-fly
got...
moment.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to point out later on, too. The tooth-fly moment at the very beginning.
Yeah.
And the nice little moment with Hiccup and Astrid being by themselves, having a quiet moment. That was nice, too.
Wanting to be by themselves.
And then...
Yeah, wanting to.
So yeah, fantastic episode. I love it.
Although, again, the better Stormfly ship happens in the next episode.
Oh yeah. Ooh.
I'm just saying that
Them-
now to
them
just make him
fighting
mad because I know it's gonna bother him. I know that.
Okay, so shall we move on?
Yeah, absolutely. This was a great episode. Like,
Great
if there's
episode.
anything you have to say about this season, this was definitely a great episode.
Triple Cross is the name, by the way.
So, episode 9, Family Matters. I do not expect Jaleel White here. This is not that show. But anyway, I will say this. My favorite Snotlout moment is in this episode where he writes a book.
Yes.
I would buy that book.
Yes. So
I
for
would buy
one,
that book. five times physically, and another time digitally, if it was a thing. I love that moment.
For one,
This was such a great Snarlow
yes,
episode
this
for
was
just
great.
humorous back and forth.
But then for one,
Yeah.
me and my friend who were doing the episode or the challenge, we were making up chapter titles. Granted, like 90% of them were very bad, but like we're making up chapter titles for him. And then one of them though that you can agree on is, which we came with in this episode because some of them were later as well. I think we said chapter whatever number, Hiccup is whipped. And
Yep.
you could definitely
He's
agree
most certainly a
after this
pushover.
episode.
Yeah, that Hiccup is a pushover.
Yeah, for Astrid. And then let's just put it this, and I think this is Wolf. I'm pretty sure this is what you're talking about when you're saying Astrid's making bad decisions, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, this one definitely felt for Astrid. It's like, it feels like she should know better than to bring Garth along at this point, knowing where they're going. But, again, I think it shows that Astrid isn't perfect. She can make mistakes. But this kind of ends up becoming the problem for Astrid. Generally, the mistakes they make her make between the movie and the show, the mistakes they make Astrid make more often than not feel like they're out of character for her somewhat because of how they kind of portray her as this character who, within combat situations, should know a lot better, but she still makes those kind of mistakes. So again, it's kind of hard to, I think it's hard for people to, or at least for the show and the movie to say like, well, okay, so this is the character we have for her. How can we make her seem flawed in some way that doesn't feel completely off? And I think this is one of those things that it's hard to do because they have this character set up for her. And so when they do show her flaws, it feels like for, people who are paying attention and watching, like this feels kind of off for her because it doesn't seem like this is a mistake that she would make. This seems like more something the twins or even, Fish Legs to a smaller degree might make.
More.
Or
And,
even Snotlout, not thinking. Even then, Snotlout calls her out like, this is a bad idea. Chapter blah, blah, blah. This is a bad idea. I called it.
Yeah.
So even Snotlout knows this is a bad idea.
There's a scene near the end where they're trapped in the cave and Astrid actually goes, "This is all my fault." And I said, well, I could forgive them if they're going with that direction, that Astrid admits that she's at fault.
And then they have Hiccup take the blame for her.
Yeah,
it's like,
then Hiccup is like, "No, this is my fault.
I was
made
a pushover.
No,
I should have said no.
No, you didn't.
he should have. He absolutely should have.
If he admitted, it's like, well, this is my fault too. I should have said no.
He absolutely should have. Hiccup is most certainly a pushover. He shouldn't have
But
been.
here's the thing. He said no. She pushed him. He
got pushed over. That's what a pushover means.
But
yeah.
Astrid,
true,
but I mean, again,
but
it kind of takes away from the character development here. Astrid should have realized, she should have, Hiccup shouldn't have they shouldn't have had Hiccups come in to say, hey, it's not just your fault. We all made the mistake here. No, she made the mistake here, Hiccup. It was definitely her fault. She definitely misstepped here. Allow her to accept that and move on from that. Like, hey, this is my fault. I need to own up to this and figure out a way out of here and, help out. Like, it definitely, I think, would have felt a little bit better if Hiccup didn't come in to immediately try and comfort her. Like, I get what they're trying to do there, but I think that's kind of the wrong moment for it, I would feel. But again, this is definitely one of those episodes where I feel like they tried to do an Astrid episode and they tried to, say like, hey, her character is flawed. She does make mistakes even in battle. And I get that and I kind of understand where you're going for that. But this isn't one of those mistakes I feel that she would make personally. It feels a bit off for her to make this kind of mistake. Like she should definitely know better.
Well, see, you also have to think that, they really want to expand Astrid's character because
absolutely.
Everybody keeps getting this idea. I mean, they just keep going back to it, though, that she's a warrior. She shouldn't do this and this and this and this, which is why exactly, which is why people have issues with when Hickstrid. It's like, oh, why is she so relaxed? She's a warrior. She shouldn't be relaxed. Well, that's people grow up. It's like
that part I'm actually fine with because I think that makes perfect sense for her. Like, she's this gruff person who knows how to fight and can take people in a fight and is willing to do what Hiccup isn't. Like they've definitely shown that, but I think it's perfectly fine for her to have a softer side too. Like there's nothing wrong with that, and it makes perfect sense that she would have a softer side to her. Like this gruff, rough, gruff, exterior on the outside, but definitely
with the yak nog scene.
Yeah, like she does have a softer side and wants to be softer and nicer to people as well. Like it makes perfect sense. There's nothing wrong with that idea, and I think the people who say, "Well, she's a warrior, she shouldn't be in a relationship, she shouldn't be this way around Hiccup," I think they're
No,
looking at things the wrong
The wrong
way.
way.
I think they're seeing her character in the wrong way.
Yeah. There's also another thing. I really wanted because I like this idea in fan fiction where like Hiccup gets angry and she wants to do something, but he just says no, and like that's the final answer. And I could see that like in animation, like he says no, walks by her while he's like angry, and she kind of just like looks down. She's like, well, you know what? But then she realizes it later. I kind of wanted that kind of episode to happen, but I didn't really get it. We just got Hiccup as a pushover.
Yeah. We should also talk about the more important
I just have
Stormfly
one
ship.
last thing to say about
Oh, go
this
ahead.
episode.
Go ahead.
So basically, to me, Snotlout and the action saved this episode for me from being a complete bad. So it had some redeeming qualities, but yeah, again, I like Astrid, I really do, but the way this episode chose to portray her was not to my liking. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it definitely was a bit weaker character episode for Astrid, I would agree. And I can understand how other people might think that. But for Stormfly, though, this was great for her, true ship, which is Garfly. Stormfly and Garf.
Yep.
I'm only bringing this up because I know it's going to bother certain people very much if they watch or listen to the episode or if it gets back to them. So just got to bring it up just to bother them. And those people know who they are.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
But something I actually want to point out, we don't talk about it enough, but the score for this episode, for a lot of this season as well, was really good.
Yeah, amazing.
Like I loved some of the music they had in the background for a lot of episodes. This one especially. And then the very end of the episode, one last quick thought. The show is filled with a bunch of teases. The end of Snotlout's book, and they just talk about it like it's this amazing thing, and we don't get to see or hear or anything about it. Teases.
Yeah.
Teases.
Yeah.
Loved Snotlout's book idea, though. That was just great.
Yeah, Snotlout's books almost single-handedly saved this episode. But so shall we move on to the next one, episode 10 in number?
Certainly.
Rush, can you do this with your deepest, most badass voice? You can do this is better than me.
The next episode title?
Yeah.
Oh.
Episode 10, Darkest Night. That was
Wonderful.
I think he means like the Batman voice, the Nolan, not
Sean
Connery, Chris Nolan, I think his name is.
Christopher. Well, no, it's
Where's Rachel?
Well, that's
voice.
Christopher Nolan's the actor. But
Yeah, Chris Nolan.
No, Christopher Nolan is the director. Christian Bale. There we go. That's
Christian Bale, yes, Christian Bale.
Episode 10, Darkest
I
Night.
just said you want to do Batman. Okay. The Darkest Night.
It's not who I am behind the mask. It's what I do. That saves Stoic. Where's Stoic?
Yeah, there you go. We're Stoic.
Viggo Mortensen. Viggo Grimborn.
Back
Can
on
we
topic.
trust him? Viggo Grimborn.
Back
Can
on
we trust
topic
him?
before we go too far here.
Back.
Sorry. Sorry.
Yeah, okay.
Man, I really need that.
I don't think in the history of... Are we done?
Yeah,
Yes,
no.
Good. Anyway, I don't think I was ever this split on an episode of this show and maybe even any other show I ever watched. I don't think because the first part of this episode, I was like, again, good potential, but we know Stoic is going to be fine in How to Train a Dragon 2, so it didn't.
I have nothing wrong with that, but this was
Yeah.
still my least favorite episode, I'd say.
Wait,
And I'll tell you why.
Oh,
In a bit.
Yeah, but
no.
wait
Okay.
a minute. I didn't finish. I have a point.
Oh, go ahead.
So, like, I understand that this is supposed to be, I'll call it I don't know if you guys watched the show This Is Us, but this was supposed to be the This Is Us episode.
It's the
episode that
flashback.
punches
It's the flashback episode slash the how it could have been episode, if you will.
But I like that so much.
Yeah, but the start of it, the start of it is like we know Stoic is going to be fine at the end of this, so the punch isn't all that powerful. Then when Hiccup is at the lowest moment, all of his fans just seem to tell these jokey stories, which, to be honest, were kind of in poor, especially the twins, like were kind of in poor taste, if you ask me.
Again, it's kind of their humor, though, right? It's supposed to come from a place where it's colored by their experiences and who they are now, and it's them and it's also supposed to be their humor. Like the twins are always in kind of poor taste. It's who they are and what they do.
Yeah, but sometimes you can go overboard with something. This was the overboard for me personally.
Yeah, again,
but
I can kind of see it from the twins, like it's who they are.
Yeah,
but go ahead.
Maybe. But then, I don't know, something happens when we get that what-if scenario, or what if Hiccup missed Toothless. For some reason, I found that point to be really, really good. I don't know why. And it was just, people say that I've seen people already call it the fan fiction episode, but you know what? If this story was a fan fiction, it was a good fan fiction.
But see, that's the thing. So that's when I was okay. I will say this: that now that we've gotten to this point, I realized that I did not rewatch this episode. So the only things I can remember from it were I can remember the episode as a whole, but I can't really remember analyzing it from your perspective. If I look back at it, I could probably see that it wouldn't be the strongest episode. But when I was in that stage, I thought it was one of the funniest things that they all just did these own alternate universe versions of themselves. And I thought the exact same reason. It felt like they were just doing their fan fictions. And then the Astrid AU, which she still ends up with him in the end. Aw, sweet, right? I thought that was pretty funny and really cool, to be honest. So I actually had no problems with this episode. But then again, I had problems with myself at that point.
What he means is he was very drunk.
I wasn't very drunk yet. Just wait until you hear my episode 13
oh boy
review.
He was drunk at this point, at least anyways. This is I said before, I think this is my least favorite episode. I like some of the stuff they did here. Like, I can't say that I've ever read a fan fiction where Hiccup misses, Like, that's definitely a what if.
There are plenty out there that he's missed.
Oh, well, I mean, again, like, I don't consistently look for a ton of fan fiction. I'm very picky about what I read sometimes, I'll admit. But this definitely, so that's an interesting idea that I hadn't seen myself yet, that I think could be interesting and take in some interesting ways. But this is my personally least favorite episode because of the fact that it asks what if questions. It asks, hey, what if this happened? What if this happened? And unfortunately, for shows like this, any show that decided to do something like this, fan fiction exists. And there's a lot of really talented and creative writers out there who have done just this. They've sat back and asked, what if this happened? Looking back at our most recent guest that we had on, Riftraft, asked the question of what if Hiccup turned into a Night Fury or turned into a dragon? A very interesting question that definitely you wouldn't think could go anywhere interesting or be enjoyable, but definitely turns out that it is. You have, Hitchups, which asks, what if Hiccup did just decide to leave and not stay? Which goes on a very interesting story and adventure that, turns out really good. You have many other people asking, what if Hiccup was blinded? What if, Hiccup this happened? What if this happened? And when you see the show do this, like, one of the first thoughts that's going to come to mind is there's fan fiction out there that has done stuff like this much better and can go into a lot more detail and really focus on it. And that's kind of the problem with doing an episode like this. It's a lot of fun. It can be very enjoyable, but at the same time, it's very much kind of disappointing because the stuff you come up with, other people have probably already come up with and done it even better than you have, unfortunately. I can't say this is necessarily a fault of the shows for this being a weak episode for me. This is kind of fan fiction writers' fault for this being a weak episode for me because I've read such great fan fiction.
How dare you write incredible stories that you ruined a TV show for me. How dare you?
But I mean, that kind of is the complaint that I'm kind of making here to a degree, really. Like, this episode felt the weakest to me because of fan fiction. That's not, and that's not inherently the show's fault. It's just fan fiction exists now, and there's not a lot they can do about that.
Yeah.
There's still some good stuff in this episode, but this episode overall, I think, felt weaker to me because of that.
Yeah. Two things I want to mention about this episode. There's some minor things I already said, that this episode was like, first half was and the second one was I really enjoyed. But
I also want to point out, Astrid thinks so little of Toothless that in her scenario episode, she thinks Toothless would get caught in a net and knock himself out.
Yeah.
That's how little she thinks of Toothless. Like, wow, Astrid.
Probably.
And Toothless just accepts that, by the way.
Yeah.
He just sits there and accepts that. If I was him, she's getting bit later.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I want to say, when they do flashback to How to Train Your Dragon 1, you can see the animation difference, like the quality of it.
Yeah.
It was great. And the second thing, I don't know, seeing like Race to the Edge Hiccup with How to Train Your Dragon 1 Hiccup's clothing was like one
a little weird.
It was like an uncanny valley in a sense.
Yeah. Can't agree. It definitely I definitely did kind of a double take moment when I saw that. Wait, what? Wow. Okay.
My favorite part though was in that flashback AU, how Hiccup gets hit in the chest by the Whispering Death Blast, but he still loses his leg because reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Astrid's coloring of a story is very interesting, to say the least, about how she ends up at the same point.
Yeah, because which proves that Hiccup didn't show her anything. This proves that she just wants Hiccup for his dragon. Clearly.
Even though she thinks very little of him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
how easy it is to knock him out. Oh.
I got that from a fan fiction before. It was
well, it is the fiction episode. Hey-yo.
Yeah.
Anyway, one thing I do like is that, if we had to go with the dragon, I'm glad it was, a Whispering Death, Toothless's enemy.
Yeah, that was pretty good. Just callback right
Yeah,
there.
that was a nice callback, absolutely.
Okay, so anything else about this episode?
Nope.
Okay, so next one is the Guardians of Vena. I will say that the setup for this episode is great, because at the end of the previous episode, we see Heather arriving at Berk all beaten up and injured, and this episode begins with her telling them what exactly she's been through, and it was a good way to set up an episode, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Would agree. It was a good follow through. Would definitely agree.
Yeah.
And then we see Alvin.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Alvin. That was a nice little call. That was a nice little bring up as well. It's like, finally, one last shot of Alvin. Great, awesome.
We
Got to see
another
Alvin one more
shout out
time.
of Alvin.
We'll definitely get to what we didn't get to see in a bit, from the entirety of the season when I talk about that later. But
no, I think I know what you're talking about, and we did get to see something.
We'll get there.
We'll get.
To bother Rush for a second, I love the look Toothless gives Stoic as Hiccup and Toothless decide to leave to go to Vanaheim.
That was heartbreaking.
Because, I wrote down in the note here that I got to figure out a way to rope that into the Toothless's evil theory just to bother you.
Yeah.
like Toothless giving Stoic that look is just because, mwahaha, my evil plan is coming together.
Yes, they took out Stoic.
No, guys, we all know that what Toothless really thought was good.
Ah, yes, the leader of the Vikings is now gone.
Now that means this puny human can possibly take over.
Yeah.
I'm one step closer.
One
But yeah,
step.
I wrote down that I wanted to
Especially
bother
after,
you with that look somehow.
after I heard what. No. If we want Tootles to go the snot out route, especially after what this skinny blonde thought about me being trapped by a net and knocking myself out.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's
you
what
pointed
turned him evil.
out
That's what turned him evil. After thinking so little of him, that's what turned
exactly,
Toothless evil.
exactly. Like I get her the most
It
awesome
gets
person.
this theory gets even better. This theory just gets better, Rush. You should just jump on board now.
Single episode.
We'll have to move that to a later episode because first off, we're almost at the 2-hour mark,
Yes.
Yeah.
and we only have
So
3 episodes, including this one, still to go.
so
Granted, okay, hold on. Before we even get there, so we can just without discussing anything, I say we split. So we take the next 2 episodes. We put the 2-parters into one, but we split it into everything, and then we take a whole section of that ending scene, those ending parts out, like, and then we talk about that separately.
Yeah, sure.
Before we get there, okay? Yeah,
Maybe.
just a little. Anyway, now back on to Guardians of Anaheim.
Am I the only one who thought Hiccup was going to kill the dude?
Yeah, I didn't think he would kill him.
Yeah, I didn't think he would either.
But I did like how the twins interrogate that guy about, his work schedule and how many days off he gets. I don't know. I like that. It was funny.
Does anyone remember the fourth wall break? Because I have written down here and fourth wall break, and but I cannot remember what Tuff said.
But maybe how many? I don't remember. Maybe how many times Hiccup told them not to do something, or how every few months.
Because just to quickly go over it, I wrote down in the notes, like, also thank you, Tuff, and fourth wall break. Like, I have no clue what that's referencing now.
Yeah.
But I wrote it down.
Me, I was drunk during this part. Anyway, but I do remember, however, Tuff asking the flyer like what the job is like. That was pretty funny.
That was great. That was a lot of fun. And then him thinking like, oh, they might come over to my side. I should like, hey, why don't you switch sides? It's a lot better over here. And they both just laugh like, oh, no. And then we see that same, dragon flyer getting killed later. It's like, yeah, glad we didn't take him up on the offer.
Okay.
Overall, it was, a decent episode. I don't remember much from it, to be honest. It was there.
Yeah, I like how I think it would have been interesting if they showed the Guardians actually dying, because they did show them getting they kind of give off this idea like, oh, the Guardians are dead, but they're not. They do come back to life and everything. They were just in a comatose state. It kind of took away a little bit of the permanence or the importance of how bad Krogan and Johan actually are, and what it means to lose the Guardians of Anaheim. It kind of took away from that a little bit, I feel, and it would have been interesting. I think it would have been more interesting if they would have left them, like, hey, they did take them out, they are gone. But still, yet it was this was a good episode, a fun one, and an enjoyable one. And there's definitely a lot of good moments between, for seeing Hiccup and how he is torn about going and not going and stuff like that. Between being a son and actually having to fulfill his duties to Berk and his want to protect dragons as well. A lot of good stuff going on there. Mm-hmm. And then also, like you said, Alvin's back. Great. Always love Alvin. Always nice to see Alvin. Fun character.
Okay. Is that it?
Yeah, that's pretty much all I had to say about that.
So, episode 12, King
and
of
13.
Dragons. So if we are doing both episodes, I just want to point out something really quick, that episode 13 didn't have the regular opening, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, goddamn it, these few seconds of the opening are taken away from the entire episode. We need to cut them.
Well, the other thing too was, so when I was watching this with my person, he was like recording it, and we were trying to get all the timings done correctly. So it's like, all right, we'll because if you let Netflix start the next episode for you, it goes straight to the end of the intro. So I
Mm-hmm.
would let it do that. I'd pause and then I'd scroll back. I didn't even notice like how much time it was. So I scrolled back, waited for him. We did a countdown, and then we clicked start, and like it basically started immediately. It's like, oh, okay then.
Yeah. So we said we're doing both of these episodes together,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Speaking
So
of, the beginning of this episode, I loved how they played up the idea that the King of Dragons is the Vermilion, is the Dramillion. Yeah, the Titan Wing.
Yeah. For a long
Dramillion.
time, I thought it was Jermillion for some reason.
It's Dra.
Yeah, I know it's Jermillion.
Like I was.
You were also drunk though, so it's understandable.
I did think that it's interesting that they're not building it up to be the wildebeest, but then when they said he has the power to control other dragons with its mind, I said, oh, okay, so is this new dragon can do it? Or
Yeah, I loved the fact that I was almost right that the King of the Dragons isn't going to be the Bewilderbeast, but then they kind of played it off like, oh no, we're actually going to do the thing with the Bewilderbeast. I was so happy because I was going to be able to come in here. It's like I called it. The show's not going to do the thing that everyone thought they were going to do, and they almost didn't. I got to give them credit for that. They played it off pretty well right there.
Yeah.
What did you guys think that they're all leaving the edge because Hiccup needs to be on Berk because of Stoich's condition?
I mean, it makes sense, right? None of them went to the edge they all went to the edge because of Hiccup to a degree. Like they all had their own reasons for going as well. They wanted to explore the archipelago and expand the horizons too, but they wouldn't have done it without Hiccup. And if Hiccup's not there, they don't really have much of a reason to stay either. So it was, a good moment, I think. It makes a lot of sense that they would all come together and they would all leave together.
Yeah, and I also did like that when Hiccup says that he's not coming back to Berk, he's going to fight Krogan and Johan. Spider is actually the one who tells them, your father would have done the same thing and he would have been proud of you.
That was a great spotlight moment. I thought, like, him's like, don't worry, I heard it all. Let's go. It's the same thing your father would have done, and I would have went with him too. So let's go. Like Spylo had a lot of great moments in this episode. It was great to have him there along.
He was great, and also for me around it's pretty much before we get to the battle, apparently the riders have been on Dragon's Edge for a year, according to Astrid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So no, that's interesting. Like we talked about the time differences in this show, so apparently all these seasons take place across a year.
Yeah.
By that, I'm assuming you're not a fan of that idea.
Not that I'm not a fan. It's just, it's just them asserting that fact. So it's like, fine, I guess we'll take it, even though there's a lot of other things you could point to say otherwise, but it doesn't matter. It's not a major point.
I mean,
in the episode.
It's time. How to Train Your Dragon in general, when it comes to time, has never been something that's been great, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
Like even the movies have a problem with time. Second movie happening and possibly all of one day almost.
I still say 2 days because we get a nighttime.
Even then, 2 days. 2 days. 2 days for all of that. It feels a little ridiculous.
Yeah.
Just a little bit. But, I mean, on topic, back to the show, though.
The all-around battle between the riders, the dragon, and the dragonflyers was great. I love how Hiccup missed a headshot. Like, if Krogan didn't dodge that arrow, he would have been dead.
That moment would have been so much cooler if Krogan would have just went and just reached out his hand and just grabbed the arrow. Like, that would have been so great. Like, yes, Krogan.
What if he turned and caught it in his teeth?
Like I feel like they missed the moment there for Krogan just catching the arrow, though.
No. You know how he stands on the dragon? Maybe if he pull the handstand and grab it with his feet and threw
Now we're getting a
back.
bit
That was-
ridiculous. Now we're getting a bit ridiculous.
Yeah.
Krogan's
Yeah,
cool,
like-
but he's not that cool.
Like
Come
I can't.
on.
Like, come on, HC. Be realistic here. He can catch in his teeth, but not in
Yeah,
his feet.
yeah, it's a show about dragons. For the love of God.
Yeah,
What's
Are you saying
realistic?
dragons aren't real, HC?
I will end this episode right now.
But yeah, like
there's
episode
only one
12
right
was
hand,
a lot
so-
of good setup. And it was also really cool how we found out that, hey, how the writers see the Dromillion just sitting in the middle of the ocean. It's like, wait, we thought this was the king of dragons, but they left it here. If that was the case, why? But like that was a really good moment to see the Dromillion there, just kind of
Yeah. It's like
hurting
Yeah.
a lot and all that.
That was great.
It was great
And
to see
also-
Which rolls
the
us-
pain.
Part is that part that also there's like I think there's an error or something that like misses Hiccup by an inch. Is
That was
in
the
this part?
harpoon. Yeah, that was in episode 12 where they shoot the harpoon at the Dromillion, which is how they finally catch it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was like I saw this and was like shit. It was inches from his face. That was the episode of Close Calls, I guess.
I loved Spotlight and Snotlight's little moment too. It's like, hey, you're a great wingman, boy. I'm glad you're here with me. Like that was a nice little moment between Spotlight and Snotlight too. And then again, like this episode just had a lot of good, the writers and Spotlight doing a lot of different fighting back and forth and just having a lot of fun. It was fun seeing Spotlight just like, I have no clue when I've been so happy. I'm sure I've been happier, but right now I'm just having too much fun to care. Like that was a great moment.
Also, bye Gruffnut.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Trapped on an island with the Dromillions. Have fun.
After he was trapped on an island with catastrophic Quakens.
I thought for a second there with Gruffnut, it's like, oh, he's going to go back for the Dragon Eye lenses or something. He's going to steal it from them to get back at Johan and the group. They're like, oh, Gruffnut's actually, they're going to turn him around just a little bit. And I'm going to be like, oh, this is great. No. It's like, all right, then. Yeah, I can understand it and see it. Never mind. And of course, it triggers a trap.
Yeah. Okay. If
But
we are
moving right along to
I'm,
episode 13,
yeah,
part 2.
smoothly transition to 13 to part 2. One inconsistency I already found is that they talk about how the dragons are not getting close to the Berserker Island because the Alpha is beneath the island, and there's a thing and then they say, wait, so how do the baby razor apes of the Wing Maiden are able to be on the island? And they say, well, maybe because they're babies, their listening is not
developed.
It was so. I guess this was supposed to foreshadow that babies don't listen to anyone. But if that's the case, Astrid shouldn't have asked this in How to Train Dragon 2 when they're using the babies to go back to Belk.
Well, it makes a little sense because they also immediately after that say, hey, maybe our dragons will work, and they do fly down there, and their dragons are able to be in that area as well. So you can see that the Blue Order Beast's kind of distracted, and at that time he is kind of, again, there's a bit of, I think, how they set this episode up. You're supposed to see like what's happening beneath the island is happening at the same time as when the Wing Maidens come in and they're flying with their own dragons all around the island. That's supposed to be happening at the same time. One isn't happening after the other. They're supposed to be set up to happen at the same time, kind of. I think that's something you have to take away from this episode.
Yeah.
Okay. Before we go to beneath the island, I just want to say the Hick Street part was good. I like that.
That was a good moment.
Yeah. So this is
There's
the part
another
that I was
moment.
talking about earlier where
And also,
he pulls her back.
and
Kind of painful.
There's another
Also,
moment that we
I
should point out as well for
say-
Astrid's character. I'm curious if you're going to point it out.
I just want to say, go back to the previous episode. I totally called it that where Hiccup and Johan are fighting in the snowy area. Those were the Bewilder Beasts icicles. I called it in the previous episode on the trailer.
We already knew that though from
Yeah,
season 4. Though.
We really guessed it. Season 5, not 4.
Season 5. My apologies.
We already figured it out that it was the Bewilder Beast stuff.
No. I said in the trailer episode that
Oh, that's where they're
I
fighting.
didn't-
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's below.
Uh,
But I mean-
We haven't gone below yet.
We kind of
So,
already
yeah.
knew that. But anyways, The
Wait,
thing that's more
that
important,
is Astrid
General
blocking
Hoff.
the thing with her axe, right? That's what you're talking about.
No, General Huff.
Oh,
Astrid being General Huff.
okay,
That's
yeah.
the important Astrid
Just
moment.
being General Huff, you're right.
Yeah, that was a good one. Well,
There's also a good Snarlout and Spylout moment here too. Again, like they had a lot of fun back and forth, and this definitely felt like an ending episode.
We're going to talk a lot about what's going on underground. Let's wrap up in the entire thing that happens above ground first.
All right, above ground, very quickly. Loved the beginning of this fight with Dagger just kind of standing there like and telling his men like aim the catapults at the ships, and they're asking, "Are you sure, sir? Like, shouldn't we aim at the dragons?" No. Follow my lead. I know what I'm talking about. And it just, and Dagger does, like, he knows that the dragons aren't going to come onto the island. They're going to have to fly back, and he wants to target the ships. That's a great Dagger moment. I love that. That was him being really smart and clever.
Yeah.
I love that moment.
And I also liked how all the dragon, like, you know what I said in Race to the Edge Season 4, where you could tell that the final episode was supposed to be the finale? You could really tell that they went all out. The screen that was there, and the skrill was there, and
like all these goddamn dragons were there, dude.
All
sure, yeah.
Showed up, and everyone had his and her own moment to shine, and it was.
You had above ground. You had Snotlout and Fish Legs, showing like they're fighting over Roughnut finally. Like, okay, that was a very quick, weird way to show that, but sure. Then you had Spylout and Snotlout's moment. You had all of the other characters' moments. You had the Wing Maidens come in. The only way the above ground fight could have been made just that little bit better is if very closer to the end you would have had Stoic come in, with Gobber and them doing some stuff as well. I was just waiting for them to have Stoic come rushing into with Skull Crusher. I was just waiting for that moment. It never happened, but I was definitely waiting for them to do something like that.
Yeah,
I'm not complaining. I don't think it. I don't think it would have made it better. I don't think it would have made it worse. It just would have been like that little nice, a nice also touch. I feel for to just have everything coming together. It would have also been really great. I think if you would have had the Defenders of the Wing show up too, just really bring that finale feeling together. But what we got for that final fight was still a lot of fun, I think.
Yeah, so I really enjoyed it. Anyway, so shall we go below ground?
Yes, we
Certainly.
shall.
Okay, so one thing I do want to say, when we see, did anyone think that the Bewilder Beast model is the same as in the How to Train a Dragon 2? I think it's the same model.
It's not as fleshed out.
I don't see why they use the model though.
Something I did notice, I examined it several times. I think this is Drago's Bewilder Beast.
I don't think it is.
I don't think it is either. It's not as
like,
dark.
At first I thought it was Valka's, but then looking back at it, it has the brown spots that that Drago's had and Drago's Bewilder Beast had, but. I could be wrong, but...
I don't think it's his. I think he also found another egg, because if it is his Bewilder Beast, it implies a lot more with certain issues. And again, that also comes back to the fact that, it says, DreamWorks even has it on their main site that they say he raised it from an egg, from a baby, so...
Well... This is a discussion that we will keep for a later episode.
No, HC. DreamWorks Wiki, Dina Bloss himself saying it trumps anything that Race to the Edge does. Okay, I am drawing the line there because this was even.
Wait, does it say? Wait, he said that?
That's his idea. That was his idea. It doesn't say that he said it, but it was his idea that he has said that. Oh crap! There's the I can't remember which interview it was. Either way, he was one of the people that said that Drago had raised it from an egg.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure he said that. So there's no way that this is Drago's. Plus, this is getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, even though I'm the one who actually said this. But Drago said, "Get my maps. He'll find one himself," pretty much. But back to the
we'll get to it. We'll get to it. I just want to say, the battle between Hiccup, Krogan, and Johan, amazing. I loved it. Like, the entire thing. It was great.
Yes.
And goddamn, Johan is a brutal motherfucker.
Yeah, certainly. It was interesting to see how Johan went out. And it was also interesting to see Krogan like thinking he could get one over on Toothless, and Toothless being smart enough to realize, oh, that's what you're doing. No, get out of
Yeah,
here.
and was awesome in that moment. And
That was a
also,
great little moment for Krogan and Toothless.
didn't see. I like how Jacob didn't see the Bewilder Beast. He just know this is the King of Dragons, but he didn't really see him.
Yeah, that was their whole explanation. Like he never saw.
I definitely, seeing this episode and this finale, one of my original thoughts were I definitely think there's going to be, I foresee a lot of different issues coming up with people talking about canon and many other things. And since HC's hinted at it, that definitely is an episode we plan on doing in the very quick future, talking about how Race to the Edge compares, especially with this final season, to canon, and looking at all of the show as canon and how it can be taken and how it should be taken, and many different other things is definitely something we'll be talking about in the future. But it's going to be interesting to talk about, but I definitely foresee a lot of arguments in the future as well about some of this stuff. But overall, I think they handled it well enough. It may not be perfect, it may have its faults, but they still handled it well enough that I don't feel that it infringes on canon in any major way, for the most part.
Well, shall we talk about the surprise reveal
well, I mean, there's a few surprise reveals.
So each different scene has something that I want to point out pretty much.
I think the first scene we get is Astrid wearing her red tunic.
Yes. But there's
That's
also
a small
something
little nod.
else. That's okay, so the rings, right? The rings. We're talking about so we're on the very last ending epilogue.
Mm-hmm.
So
and
Astrid's wearing her red.
Wait, wasn't Drago before the epilogue?
No.
Drago, no, he was a little bit after.
He was after.
Okay.
So
or during.
However
you want to take it.
So we got the very first scene is the Astrid's wearing a red shirt, but it's also Dagger and Mala marriage with the rings. Mm-hmm. Guess who's the ring bearer?
Yeah, Shadowmaster.
It's Shattermaster.
We got Shattermaster.
Shattermaster.
Dagger didn't eat him. I have to give them, like, hey, they showed that off. Dagger didn't eat him. Yeah. Kudos, guys.
Kudos.
I can't say that anymore. I was going to come on here and say...
Saved for the wedding. I don't know why. I found this to be funny.
I was going to come on here and say, like, we could say that I could say that is fact now, that is canon, that Dagger ate him. But unfortunately, I can no longer say that.
Right.
So they showed me up.
Although,
I think I'm going to say...
If you subscribe that Race to the Edge isn't canon, then hey, he ate Shattermaster. Even though Shattermaster is part of
Shattermaster and Dagger never existed.
Exactly.
So it doesn't matter then.
Well, Race to the Edge, Dagger existed. If you from Riders and Defenders. Anyway.
Generally, people consider. Anyways, moving on.
The next scene. That is that the egg scene or is that Drago? Let's just say the eggs. Let's just move on to the egg part. Okay. Yeah. So the Winged Maidens apparently know somebody that knows somebody, and that somebody is Valka, and they give the freaky egg to Valka. And so fuck my prediction that she's always been with the Bewilderies. Apparently Bewilderies can be massive in 1 year. I was wrong.
I talked about that from them saying Drago raised his own Bewilder Beast. Like, I've already said that feels a little bit ridiculous for how fast it may have grown. And I've already talked about how ridiculous it feels that dragons grow in this fast. How ridiculous it feels for how fast the dragons grow in this world. But anyways.
I could see that a dragon could go from, like, say, baby to Gronkle size in a year, but not from baby to freaking Bewilder Beast size in a year, man.
What about from baby to Torch's size in a year? That's still ridiculous, in my opinion.
That's pushing the boundaries. Yeah, that is pushing
or
the boundaries.
Garf, for that matter. Like, baby to that size in even less than a year. Like, come on. It's ridiculous.
I think maybe, there are these type of dogs that, by a year, like that when they're born, they're very, very small, but by the time they turn 1 year old, they're already full size.
Yeah, but full size for them is like still not massive, like blue whale size. A yearling for a blue whale is, hold on, let's look up this. A yearling for a blue whale. Yearling blue whale.
He's actually looking it up.
I am actually looking it up. So, yearling blue whale, they are still not as large as their adults. They are still not. They're like about half the size. Apparently, it looks like. Let's see. I can't get a direct. Um, blue whales are difficult to weigh because of their size. Okay, thank you. Nice fact right
Well,
there.
while you search for this, I do want to say that I'm glad that if that while the riders do leave the edge and go back to Berk, I do like that the edge wasn't destroyed and they just had to leave.
Wasn't
I don't know.
destroyed.
It's fun.
Did you see how they ended the edge? The edge looks like it's seen better days.
Yeah,
Very
well,
much
because
so.
they still kept that same.
No,
They
no,
still
like,
kept the whole edge texture. In terms of graphic modeling, texture about with lava on it and place some things on fire. Oh, and by the way, so in 6 months, a calf will double in size, and then in a full year, it will also again double in size. So it's still not a full blue whale after a year. That's the largest animal on our planet right now. So, just saying.
Like, yeah, there's definitely, again, like, it's a show and it's How to Train Your Dragon. I'm not like super upset, but they've never been consistent with growth rate and age rate, within anything for How to Train Your Dragon, in my opinion.
Their
That's
consistency
just been
with
one of
growth
those
rate
things.
is saying all 6 of their main dragon riders are always going to be shorter than 90%, 99% of the Vikings in those shows.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. So shall we talk about Drago?
And there's not a whole lot to say. He's just, he's there at the end saying,
Like
like,
I
we
told
kinda
you
got
that. Hold on. Did I not predict? And you can verify me. I'm not actually trying to sound haughty at this point. Did I predict that Krogan would be killed by Drago?
yeah, I think we did. I think we talked about that. Like, that's how probably would
we
Krogan would go out, that he would go back to Drago and he would take him out for
Yeah,
failing.
I seem to recall hearing something along these lines.
It was talked about. I'm sure people in the comments will tell us that no, Rush actually got it wrong. It was Wolf or HC who said it first. Rush didn't. I'm sure they'll call you out.
I didn't say it, so if anything, it's either one of you guys.
I'm sure they'll call us out for getting it wrong and say that no, we got it wrong. This is what was actually said. So we'll find out soon, Rush.
Yeah.
One interesting thing I do want to say about Drago is that I thought this is a really good impersonator. I'm wondering who is doing Drago's voice, and then behold, in the credits, it's the same guy from the movie. It's him. He came back for these few lines, so that's
Yeah,
really
that was really good of him to do.
So Wolf, let's go back, or let's go into that scene a little bit more. When Drago says, "Get me my maps," who gets him his maps?
I don't know. Did I miss something?
You missed something.
Oh,
it is Mildew.
I completely missed that. I will have to go back and watch that.
It is so close. It looks. I mean, it's very far away, but that is a extremely subtle reference, and it is I'm pretty sure it's Mildew because it looks
so
exactly
strange.
Yeah,
well, for those of us wondering what happened to him, right? So, like, there you go, right?
But it is weird that they kind of put, if it is supposed to be mildew, it's kind of weird that they just put him there with no plans to do anything with it.
I guess it's just showing that he always hates dragons still, so he's always going to be the antagonist in that sense.
If the surprise villain would be that he would be the end-all be-all villain of How to Train Dragon 3, I'm going to fucking throw my...
Rush is right. That's not kind of mildew. That is legit mildew.
Legit mildew.
That is just straight up mildew.
Like even as a model placeholder, it's just a random thing to do.
It's a little weird, and it definitely kind of...
I feel like it's just a subtle reference, and that's
yeah. It's like just a subtle reference. It's just a little Easter egg thing. I can't believe I completely missed that. I was not paying attention at all because I didn't figure they would do anything with mildew.
Yeah,
it's nice. Not what I expected them to do with mildew, but it is nice and a little bit surprising that that's where he ended up of all places. So okay, a nice little fun nod. I can't complain about that.
Yeah, and there's also a thing like I thought about it this morning where. Like, remember when we did our Race to the Edge Season 3 episode where people talked about how maybe Krogan, back then known as the Hooded Man, people thought he was Drago, and Rush told them, No, don't you see the size difference? Like Drago's big, and
And then the,
Drogon,
the idea was that, oh, maybe, Drago became that big later on. Like,
And there was also
people
like
really.
but
there was
no,
also
but
the like he
see, both of
had
them.
both arms, and people were like, oh, maybe he loses his arm later, and like, but then Stoic said many years ago, blah blah blah.
Yeah, but forget that for a second. But what I want to say is like, seeing them both together on screen at the same time is like, yeah, how could people think he was Drago?
Mhm.
Oh wait, oh no, oh man, that really ruins though. So going back to that, if uh, they really didn't think that through though, because if not the whole size difference, but Drago needing his maps to find the King of Dragons, because if he didn't have the King of Dragons, how did he control those other dragons to go and burn the
Well, he
chiefs
never
up?
used he never used the King of Dragons to do that.
Well, then how do you
Again,
control
like
the
it's
dragons to do that?
he
That's what
didn't
I'm
Well,
saying.
control them.
well,
Like it's
you see at
established
the
in the
movie
second
where
movie that his way of training dragons is through fear, and they listen to him because they're afraid of him.
I guess
That it's not so
this is
much he's
true.
controlling them; they're doing what he says because they think he's their alpha in a way.
I guess
Even the Border Beast is afraid of Drago. Like you can see how it acts. Like it's definitely afraid of Drago and who he is and everything. Even though it's so
Yeah.
much bigger than him, even though it's so much more powerful than him, it's still afraid of him. So I can definitely, I can. That's something I think the second movie itself sets up and explains. So they're okay in that regard, I feel.
Fair enough. Well, regardless, that means that there are now two bewilder beasts. There's not just one left after Drago's killed it because of the
One in Berserker Island,
yeah, the one in
unless
Berserker
it
Island.
passed of old age or something.
Yeah, it
Oh
became
no,
a new Vanaheim.
Yes, underneath. It's
that
just very interesting.
yeah, it's up for debate. So who knows? Um,
The one thing I can say the show didn't give me was my dragon viewpoint episode.
oh yeah, I was about to mention
Yeah.
that this is the one episode that I said, well, I think Wolf is very disappointed now
I
because
never
that
did get it. They gave me a lot of other stuff that I wanted to see, which is I think, and it makes me feel like I think the show's creators to some degree like watch the Berkcast. Maybe someone from the show watches the Berkcast because there's a ton of stuff in there that I felt like this feels like it might be targeted at me. I'm sure it's like I know it's not. That's a very kind of grand idea. It's very big of me to think like this is because of me.
You're
I
so
don't
important.
think that.
I did add
Yeah,
I did add Dean one time. I did add him on
like
Twitter.
I know it's not. I'm mostly joking, but there's definitely a lot of stuff in there that I think they listen to people talking about different things like, hey, where's Mildew, or what happened to Shattermaster, different stuff like that, and they threw little small things in there for people who were talking about that and asking questions about that. So you can definitely tell they kind of listen to what the fans are saying and talking about, I think, which is a lot of fun. Still didn't get the dragon centric viewpoint episode. Still a little disappointed about that because that was a really cool idea, I think, that we never got to explore and see. But overall, still a great season from them for season
yeah,
6.
great season, and I'll say great way to end the show. Like they went out on a high, which
I can agree. It'll definitely be interesting seeing how people take it as time goes on. I definitely feel you're going to have some people who I think this is going to be a bit more of a divisive season. I think you're going to have people, especially for the season, talking about how it conflicts with canon, how it doesn't conflict with canon. You're going to see a lot of different discussions and arguments about that. You're going to see a lot of different discussions and arguments about this ending specifically for canon, how it relates, and what it does well, what it does wrong, and whether it's good or not. It's going to be what I feel is a divisive season for a lot of people.
Absolutely, I agree. Wait, that's not
okay.
divisive. No, it's not going to be divisive. What are you talking about? There we go.
Anyway, is that it or
Last thing, the S was very important.
Yep.
We had the S at the very end. That
Very
was
end.
nice.
She was still wearing her red shirt.
Yep.
Book is fine, obviously, and
Stoic is for a little bit.
And I think that's pretty much it.
Why do I feel so empty now?
I know there is
All
something.
around me are familiar. Oh, sorry.
Moving on.
Moving on.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I don't know about you guys, but I feel like I've said everything I have to say. We pretty much talked for more than 2.5 hours.
We are at the 2 hours and 24-minute mark on recording. We've been live for almost 2.5 hours, but it's actually not our longest episode. I think season 4 was our longest.
Maybe. But anyway, I think because, you know what, if any of you have nothing to say, so maybe we should wrap this up. Like
I think this is the end of the episode.
Yeah,
we should say we'll definitely, I think next week we'll be coming back
Trust
with...
me, I prepared a lead-in for this.
Well, go ahead then. I don't have to.
So, even though the show is over and we covered all the seasons, our Race to the Edge finale special is not yet done. We still have a few things to talk about regarding...
You can't kill us as easily as you killed Stoic.
That's one way of putting it, but anyway, we still have a few more topics to talk about regarding this show. Each and every one of the 8 seasons it has. So until then, though, you can tell us everything you thought about this season of Race to the Edge on the Tumblr, where we are known as Berkcast Team, on Twitter, where we are Berkcast with capital B, capital C, on the Berk Formvine forums, we are all there, and on the How to Train Dragon Discord, where we are all also there. And of course, the comment section for those who want to keep it simple. So until the next time, I was HC.
I was Rush.
And I've been Wolf.
We will talk to you all next time when we continue our How to Train a Race to the Edge finale special. So take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.